Hey guys, you are watching your anime world. How are you all? Please support to subscribe this channel for watching new interesting stories. So in this video, we will see second part, what if Deku became the hero of justice. Here is short summary. Most of us know the story of Izuku Midoriya and his rise as a hero in the shadow and later wake of All Might. But what if he had help in a variety of ways from a different kind of hero from what he has been raised to believe existed? But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible, share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. I'm back, y'all. Needed to take time at home with the family. That aside, however, I've been laughing my ass off for a while since the reveal that something I had thought for a while was proven true. That the quirkless had far greater potential than any idiot with a quirk. I had thought with the chapter after the joint training that the only reason OFA had gained as much true strength was that there were two quirkless who were able to unlock the full potential, rather than a quirked person who was worthless or weaker because of their quirk. But that isn't important right now. Right now, it's about the story I started a while ago. So on with the show. No POV. There was a bit of chaos for the rest of the weekend in Mustafa City. With the break-in and villain attack on Ua in the middle of the week and the Yakuza being destroyed overnight, a variety of villains and heroes were concerned. In a bar across town, Kurogiri was talking with his shadowy master. This matter is quite unsettling, master. Our failed attack was one thing, but we had been planning to try and recruit Stain as well. Now instead, he destroys a villain group and gives himself up willingly to the police. And who knows what details he and his ally may have taken from the Yakuza. I need your guidance on what to do next. Even though neither man's face could be seen, there was a clear panic in Kurogiri's voice. While his master was not panicking quite the same, he too was concerned. He had known the Yakuza were planning something, but they had been working at it for years. It in some ways reminded him of when All Might had returned to Japan and started demolishing his allies and subordinates in his so-called Bronze Age. He would smash and break through all the powers and tools he had built up over the centuries, making it look like the empire he built could collapse so easily. I agree, this strange element that has appeared is concerning, but we have other matters we must attend to. First, how is Tamura? The master said to Kurogiri. Kurogiri explained that Tamura is in a bit of a coma from the injury he suffered. Though most of that is just from the shock of having his arm ripped off. The doctor has said that he should recover in a day or two. I've been looking into some black market prosthetics we can give him. His quirk has been cut in half effectively, but maybe a prosthetic with a weapon can be a good replacement for now. At this the master HMED and nodded approvingly. He then went to ask about the status of the doctor's other experiments. Said man came in on the video call to explain, there aren't any as strong as the Nomu I made to fight All Might, but I do have a variety of them. But I'm a bit more worried about those three kids who have impressive quirks all their own. Actually, doctor, I'm not so sure about some of them. When I brought a few of the thugs up to the students, two who stepped forward to fight them said they didn't have quirks. And yet they smashed through and broke every villain by themselves. They even mentioned that the one who fought with All Might didn't have a quirk either. Kurogiri explains. The doctor on the other hand is shocked by this and goes into a spiel of how that is impossible and only quirks are true power. The master though is now more unsettled than before and wanted to deny the possibility. If what they say is true, then I can't take their powers. And against them I could be overpowered more easily. The master says before telling the doctor to calm down. He gives follow-up orders to both of his subordinates to be ready for whatever happens. To Kurogiri, he tells him to look into new recruits for the league, and the doctor he tells to make sure Tamura will be ready when he wakes up. In his mind, after giving his directions, the master thinks, what kind of demons or new form of monsters are here? And why now? Now I could have a chance for a new body, let alone a chance to finally defeat All Might and put an end to the power of one for all. But these new factors bring up even more questions and problems. He puts some of these thoughts aside and tries to make plans to deal with these strange unknowns. At UA and through the rest of the city, however, there are different thoughts going around. Most of the civilians are amazed at the idea that a crazed killer had all of a sudden changed his ways and aided another in the destruction of the Yakuza and the saving of a little girl. and with much less risk and damage compared to if a group of heroes had done it. Not only that, but the man had turned himself in willingly and called out to Sir Night-Eye that he was closer to the true ideal of a hero. This caused a bit of a ripple as well, and people started looking into the hero killer and his possible motivations. Many found that he had been a hero student himself but grew disgusted by the reasons and ways certain people were trying to become heroes and left it behind. He had started preaching about trying to regain the true ideal of heroes, but no one had listened to him, causing his fall. But whoever he had met had given him a new faith in the possibility of heroes. A short interview with Stain, or Akaguro Chizome, revealed that the ones who recruited him were to him true heroes. He went on to say that they had captured and stopped multiple villains, but not for fame or money, but to save and help people just like All Might. He also said that they were not quirked people, as they did not try to show off what they could do. This shocked the society of Japan as well, given they have grown to think quirks were everything. But now a pair of vigilantes were more powerful than most heroes and didn't possess quirks was jaw-dropping. But this was nothing compared to the bomb Chizome dropped next. It isn't so surprising that someone without a quirk can do a bit. I no longer possess mine. One of them saved my life by healing me, and in doing so healed me of my quirk. The reporter who interviewed him wanted to ask more, but the time for visitors was up at Tartarus and he bid them a good day. The average civilians were reeling at all that had been revealed by Chizome, and the hero community was also nervous as well. As Aizawa would state during a meeting at UA, if it is the case that these vigilantes don't have quirks, let alone can destroy them, do we even have the right to or even can stop them? The quirk laws only permit the use and restriction of quirks. We've never had to deal with any other powers. So, what options could there be for dealing with them? Nezu himself was humming and thinking over the matter while staff of UA were arguing amongst themselves. When he was done thinking, he clapped and got all of their attention. For now, we should focus on other matters. All Might, your old sidekick Sir Night-Eye was requesting our aid. Yes. Yes, sir. He wanted the girl Chizome brought to him to be trained a bit here at UA. From the data they analyzed from the Yakuza, she has an incredible and terrifying power. Here at UA she could be kept safe and we could help her gain control. Nezu approved of the plan to bring the girl to UA for training and protection. But with a condition that she come to them after the UA Sports Festival. At that he reminded his faculty that they needed to tell their students about the matter. Now for some other matters. I've been in touch with the head of the Hero Commission and apparently Chizome was wanting to talk with a few of us from UA. I'm not sure what he wants, but it could give us some insight into who he is. We might also gain some information about his accomplices of this matter. A few around nodded and agreed, with All Might saying that he would be one to meet with the man. There were a few who wanted to protest, but Nezu agreed. With that he told his faculty to go about their daily business and take care of their classes. For the students, however, they were going over and over all the crazy things that have happened in the last few days. Class 1A especially. Man, as if the villain attack wasn't enough, now a major vigilante versus Yakuza fight happens the day after. What's next? The ultimate evil shows up to fight All Might in a big battle that destroys the city. Kaminari asks his classmates before Aizawa shows up. A few others laughed at the idea, but others were panicking a bit at the thought. Izuku on the other hand knew part of what happened just from the bit that had been reported. He knew Jotaro and Saphentite had been the ones behind the whole raid. He wanted to say something, but he understood why they went into that battle. Were he in their position, he probably would have done the same thing. Though with probably more broken bones, given I can't control all of what I can do. I should really meditate more. I can hear what part of OFA may be when I sleep, but I can't talk to it directly yet. After that mussing, Aizawa opened the door and the whole class quieted down. 2 seconds, you're all getting better. Now then, I'm not here to tell you anything more about what has happened over the long weekend. For now, you all have a bigger fight coming. At that, more of the students were panicking and worrying about what this fight could be. The UA Sports Festival is coming up. After Aizawa said that, most of the class started cheering. Though Jotaro and Saphentite were both confused. Once Aizawa had clammed the rest down with a flash of his eyes, Jotaro asks, since when is a stupid high school field day a big deal? At that, Most of his classmates just look at him with shocked looks on their faces. I agree, what's the big deal? Seems kinda pointless honestly. Saphantite says, shocking more of them. After a few have regained themselves, Aizawa explained that the UA Sports Festival had become a huge matter in the quirked society they lived in. It effectively replaced the Olympics in terms of interest and spectacle. With this, UA shows the potential for the up-and-coming next generation of heroes. While most of the students are excited about this, Jotaro just has a deadpan look of annoyance, and Saphantite is shaking her head in disgust. So, it's literally a way to show off how a select few dumb animals and monsters play with their stupid little tricks. Just so more people can feel like they are the natural change that should happen. Jotaro says the first line and Saphantite finishes his thought. While many of their fellow students are indignant at that, Aizawa calms all of them down before saying, I wouldn't say you're all wrong, but I want to know more of where your basis for these complaints are. To which Saphantite speaks up first with, well, obviously the hero courses are gonna be the ones they show off. And it's not just about the training they have received. It's also about the fact that they are the ones to show off as the next investment for most of your warped super cops you all call heroes. Before any of the others can speak up, Aizawa shocks the students by agreeing with her, saying that it is true that they are trying to encourage hero agencies to look into the students more. Jotaro speaks his mind next, saying, I'm guessing that while most of everyone can compete, others are just in this for a possible investment for later in life, given how stupidly wrapped up in quirks this completely beeped up world of fools is. I'm betting that even with all of the classes competing, the main groups will just be focused on the hero classes. And you want them all to compete, in some sort of survival of the fittest type of competition. You can try to pretty it up however you want. This is just about showing who the best animal is. Though something as worthless as quirks. While a few of the students try to refute the statement and basically attacks who they are, Aizawa is looking down at his podium and sighing. I really don't like that kid, but he's not wrong. We've all tried to pretty it up as much as we can, but at the end of the day it is just a way to show who has the best quirk or usage of a quirk. Though if anything, him, Midoriya and Anwar might just change that. After musing over this, Aizawa calms his class again. After part of class has let out for the day, a large number of students have gathered outside of Class 1A. Most are wondering what they are there for, but Izuku and a few other realize and tell them, they're scouting out the people who survived a villain attack. If we can handle the dangers of a pro hero, then they figure they've got to figure out as much as they can. That's right, man, we're here to see what you look like. A boy with gray hair and sharp eyes and teeth says to them before introducing himself as Tetsu. But another few people come up and interrupt a few questions they have. The first is Katsuki Bakugo, who comes and proclaims, I don't give a beeps about the extras who managed to survive a villain attack. I'm just here to tell you all, I'm taking a spot in the hero course. It's where I belong. While others around him are angered by that statement, another with sleepy eyes and purple hair walks up and says, what he means is that we in the general ed course have a chance to move up to the hero course depending on how well we do in the festival. While most are here to check you out, I'm here like him to declare war. With a snort, Jotaro chuckles a bit before asking what his name is. Hitoshi Shinso. I'm gonna shake up the festival as much as I can. Yeah, well, probably not as much as a few of us there, bub. Now I think there's someone else outside who wants to ask something else. That you, Itsuka? At that, Tetsu looks over at his class representative with confusion. Who coughs and says, yeah, you got a second, Jotaro? I was wanting to ask you something. Jotaro gives an affirmative and stands up to leave. When the others are blocking his path, he is tempted to let go of control and breath out as hard as he can. But he does the mature things and just says, please move. While Bakugo doesn't want to, he knows he stands no chance, so he steps aside. Shinso and Tetsu are surprised by his since they thought he would just demand they move, so they set aside as well. Well, what did you want to talk about? Jotaro asks Itsuka, who is looking down with a blush on her face. Not here. Can we talk somewhere else? Jotaro is a bit confused but agrees and follows Itsuka. While this is happening, a few others are moving away so the 1A students can leave. But not all of them do. Ojiro stops both Izuku and Saphentite to ask them a favor. Okay, I know this may sound strange, but I want your help with something. I saw how you two fought during the USJ incident. I'm actually a martial artist too, and I'm trying to incorporate my tale into a few styles. Any chance you can teach me? You're better off just asking Saphentite. She and Jotaro taught me marital arts. And Saphentite is your better option. Jotaro may be a martial artist as well, but his styles are different from the way I've seen you fight. Izuku says before pointing to said teacher in question. At this, Ojiro stands in front of Saphentite and bows at the waist with his fist in his palm and asks, "Could you teach me more?" To which Saphentite smiles and says, "Sure. I think a few of the styles I specialize in can help you. Let's talk to Aizawa about using a gym to train." At that, Ojiro lights up before asking if Izuku wanted to join them. While he wanted to refuse at first, Saphentite stops him and says he could use another partner to train with, and besides, I saw how you fought during USJ. You're not doing the daily practice as much anymore, are you? Izuku irks at that, and then Saphentite looms over him with a dark look and smiles, saying, "I think it's time we get back to basics for a while, don't you?" While this is happening, Ojiro is just thinking, what have I got myself into? As a few others leave, we cut over to Itsuka talking with Jotaro. So, what did you need? You haven't really talked to me since the entrance exam. Though half of that is on me too. Itsuka takes a breath before saying, I heard a rumor that you fought with All Might to beat a monster meant to kill him. And you used a few martial arts to do it. Jotaro is a bit surprised by the question but says, yeah, I practice a few different martial arts. Southern Shaolin, Pankration, and Shotokan Karate are my preferred types. Itsuka is impressed and interested in a few of the ones mentioned and then asks her big question, would you be willing to spar with me? Just the two of us. And I do mean the two of us. From what I've heard and what you just described, your styles would fit mine better. So, could you train with me? Please. Jotaro noticed that she seems extra nervous about the whole matter but doesn't say anything right away. Instead, he says that, sure, we can train for the week up to the sports festival. We might ask your teacher though. Aizawa doesn't like me at all. Itsuka chuckles at that and agrees to talk with her teacher Vlad King. When they go up to the teacher's offices, the two notice that Ojiro, Izuku and Saphentite are also talking with Aizawa. Guess they thought the same thing. But there are plenty of places we can train, right? Vlad. Okay, why do you name yourself one of two fictional vampires from the late 19th century? Well, it's because my quirk uses my blood as a weapon. And what do you mean too? Isn't Dracula or Vlad Dracul the only one? Vlad King asks Jotaro with a confused look, who then explains that there was a second from around the same time. When asked about this, Jotaro just says, I read quite a bit. I used to love video games, but they lost some appeal over time. Huh, well, even though you are from class 1A, I can tell that your skills could help Itsuka. I'll check with Aizawa on which gym the others are using. Once permission was given, all the students involved started training to prepare for the UA Sports Festival. So now, we're getting into the UA Sports Festival. I'm going to need to work around the teams during the second event a bit. Let alone the tournament fight. But I've got a basic idea for most of that. So on with the show. No pav. For the week leading up to the UA Sports Festival, multiple members of the Hero course and some of the General Ed course were training. For the Gen Ed department kids, this was a chance to make their dream of being pro heroes real. And while Katsuki Bakugo still thought he was the best there was, he had gained a modicum of respect for his fellow Gen Ed classmate Hitoshi Shinso. I hate to admit it, but your quirk is useful in a few different ways. Even if it has an activation trigger. Bakugo said to Shinso while practicing a little hand-to-hand. Shinso on the other hand was glad for the actual hand-to-hand experience. I'm surprised they passed you up given your quirk, man. With as flashy and capable as you are with wielding it, he said after one of their sparring sessions. At hearing that, Bakugo felt both his ego inflate again, and then a slap to his pride that he was passed over. He wasn't sure what to say or even respond to that. So, he just grunted before saying, I had a bit of bad luck in my entrance exam. You remember that big guy in 1A? At Shinso's nod, Bakugo sighed before saying, "He was in my exam group. I heard through the grapevine that he was one of the top 2. Alongside that damn Deku." Shinso has a confused look on his face at that name but urges Bakugo to continue. "I don't know what his quirk is, but he could move around and dish out power like All Might. I'm pretty sure no one could compete with him. Let alone the fact that all I did was focus on villains. I didn't try to help anyone else. He did apparently, and it boosted his score more. I heard about that, the rescue points, but it does make sense. Heroes are supposed to rescue people," Shinso said to Bakugo as they stopped for a bit. Bakugo scoffs at the idea, saying that winning was what mattered with being a hero. If you win against the villain, then you'll save people. That is what matters. Shinso disagrees and points out a matter that Bakugo often overlooks. But a lot of heroes are focused on rescue alone. Heck, even All Might's greatest feats have been chalked up to the impressive rescues he does. Bakugo is confused at that statement, given it's not what he's seen on TV and the news when they report. You should stop watching the news and that type of stuff. They are worthless. They just put up what will get them more views, Shinso says with a shake of his head. Before they start again, Shinso tells Bakugo something he had heard from a few others. "By the way, you know Midoriya and they big guy, as well as that blue girl. Apparently, none of them have quirks but have nearly 10 times the power of the rest of us. I'm not joking. Their teacher is Eraserhead and he can't shut down their powers." This floors Bakugo, since he had basically conditioned himself with thinking that quirks were the greatest thing ever. His especially. If they don't have quirks, then how are they so powerful? Quirks are supposed to be the next step of evolution. Right, if what Shinso said was true, then it brought into question what the point was even having quirks in the first place. While the 2 hardest workers from the Gen Ed department were preparing, plenty from the hero course were psyching themselves up and getting as ready as they could for the coming challenges. Itsuka particularly enjoys working with Jotaro on her martial arts and style of combat. Jotaro, on the other hand, quite liked how determined Itsuka was at facing challenges with just martial arts. It reminded him of other true heroes. "That's enough for now. Let's take 5 and rehydrate," Jotaro said after a long sparring session. Itsuka nodded as she was a bit winded. "How are you not tired? We've been sparring for 30 minutes straight. Bit of an advantage my energy absorption powers give me. Thanks to all the energy I've absorbed, I have insane amounts of stamina." Itsuka just shakes her head at that and sits down to drink some water. While she is sitting, she keeps looking up at Jotaro with a light blush on her face. She had been a bit enamored with him since he saved her during the practical for the exam. But after training for a time, she was getting a slight crush on the large powerhouse of 1A. Jotaro decides to take this time to ask a question that everyone who joins the hero course asks. "Why do you want to be a pro hero? What is your reason for doing this?" Even though Itsuka can't see Jotaro's eyes due to his sunglasses, she knows how serious he sees this point. She sighs before saying, "I think most of us who go into the hero course want to do this for a fairly shallow reason. Most of us just want to use our quirks however we want and whenever we want." She doesn't see it, but Jotaro has a truly angry expression on his face at that reason for being a hero. She presses on by saying, "A little of that is why I'm here, but I also want to try and help as best I can with my quirk. And a bit to show that traditional martial arts are still viable as training and combat." As she looks up again, she sees a softer expression on Jotaro's face compared to a few seconds ago. She blushes again before pressing on with, "Everyone is all about big flashy punches and blasts fired from their bodies that relate to their quirks. But they forget that the quirks are still part of the body. And plenty of people learned how to fight without needing special powers." Jotaro smiles a bit as she finishes and agrees with her. He then says, "I would say that is part of what I like about you. You see more of the bigger part to how to fight than most. Plus, you want to help and save people, not just play with your power or use it to show off." Itsuka blushes a bit more before Jotaro says that it was time to get back to work. By the time of the UA Sports Festival, Itsuka has learned the basics of a few other martial arts. She didn't feel she had quite the right physique for pankration, so she focused on Southern Shaolin and Shotokan karate to complement he already know karate and judo styles. On the other hand, Ojiro and Izuku feel like they have been run through the ringer by Saphentite. She wanted to make sure both would be as capable as possible for the sports festival, so she kept pushing them. I'd like to say she's nuts with how hard she's been pushing us. But I can feel the difference when I move and fight. Capoeira is still pretty hard for me given the focus on rhythm. But I can tell it'll be useful in finding an opening in my opponent's way of fighting. Ojiro says to Izuku during one of their breaks. Izuku nods before mentioning that Jotaro also knew a few of the same styles. But with his body shape it was a bit easier to focus on more brute force and solid stance types of styles. They chuckle a bit before Saphentite is standing over them with an angry smile before saying, "Back to work." Before long it is time for the UA Sports Festival. Before the competition even starts, a few are complaining that they can't use their hero costumes during the competition. Until Izuku points out, well, only the hero classes have costumes and specialized gear. So, it wouldn't be fair if we used it during the competition. This placates a few, but there are still those who want to show off in their costumes. Before Jotaro can give his own 2 cents on the matter, Class 1A is told to head out to the field. Once out there, Present Mike gives a special speech about them for an introduction. He does a lighter but still pushes up the second hero course class. His next introductions are noticeably light for the other classes and departments. All the more reason that this is incredibly stupid. This is all about an investment in a bunch of kids, not caring about how they feel about the whole matter. Jotaro thinks angrily. Saphentite notices and hears this before speaking to his mind with, "I know. It is a ridiculous mess, but we can't change it all right away. But we may make a big stride with the festival today. After all, the 3 strongest don't have quirks." With a smile, Jotaro calms down and focuses ahead. The R-rated hero Midnight comes up to a raised stage and with a crack of her whip says, "Now then, let's hear a few words and the sportsmanship pledge from one of the highest scoring applicants in the hero course, Midoriya Izuku." At that, everyone turns to Izuku. He had been told he would be giving a speech at the start of the competition, but it didn't make him any less nervous. With a shuddering breath he walks up to the stage and microphone to give his speech. When he looks out to all of his fellow first years, let alone all of the people in the crowd watching, he is even more intimidated. But then his eyes drifted to the 3 people who believed in him the most. All Might watching from the stands, who entrusted his quirk to him. Jotaro, who believed in his potential and said that he had even more capabilities than any could ever believe. And Saphentite, who not only believed in him but saw the potential of his mind and skills in planning. With that to calm him down, Izuku starts his speech. For all of us here today, this is the chance to show what we can do. To show that some of us may have the potential to be heroes and protectors. And for some this is a chance to get into a course that we may have been passed over for. But to all of you I say this, don't think this will ever be easy. At that a few in the audience are confused. Izuku continues with, the motto for our school is Plus Ultra for a reason. We have to push beyond what we think our limits or capabilities are. If you want to show all of what you are capable of, then you have to do just that. Push beyond your limits or what you think is possible. A few from his class nod, noting how he somewhat embodies that. Even with the possibility of breaking his bones, Izuku constantly pushes forward and pushes through his limits. Bakugo on the other hand is annoyed that the person he saw as worthless is standing up there talking like a hero rather than trying to intimidate everyone down. Another big thing to think about is don't think your quirk is the only answer to any of this. Those in many ways could be limiting themselves. You have to think outside of your power. Especially given that the top 3 from the entrance exam don't have quirks. This shocks everyone and confuses the audience watching all around. Izuku finishes out with, to truly show what you are capable of and can really do, you have to think outside of what limits you put on yourself. And then, you can show you have what it takes to be a hero. So, go beyond, and plus ultra through what you think is possible. With that Izuku steps away from the microphone. At first no one reacts, but then a few in the audience start clapping and then a decent round of applause comes from all in the stadium. Well, I wasn't expecting him to drop the big bomb that he is quirkless. He still made quite an impactful speech. Ain't that right, Eraser? Aizawa give present Mike a withering look before saying, you're supposed to be the English teacher, Mike. The word you wanted was, isn't, not ain't. This gets a few laughs from all in attendance. When Izuku meets up with his classmates after the speech, quite a few are impressed at how he handled himself. Jotaro and Saphentite give him simple nods of approval, while Eijiro is calling out that he sounded manly and passionate up on the stage. This gets a few eyebrows raised at his phrasing. One though who is not as impressed as the half-hot half-cold user Shoto. He catches the three who are supposed to be quirkless and says to them, it's pretty clear that we are the ones with the most power in our class. Probably in school, and you all seem to have the interest of All Might. Izuku is freaking out a bit while Jotaro and Saphentite have an idea on where this is going. A few of their fellow classmates are annoyed at the statement but know he has a point. My father is the number 2 hero, and he's watching right now. So, I'm going to say this. I'm going to beat all of you with just my eyes. I will take all of you down. Jotaro just snorts before saying, good luck with that. I guess since I'll at least be fighting with basically one hand behind my back, you might think you stand a chance. But I'll just tell you this. I can stomp you and your old man with both hands behind my back. This gets a few others angry, while Saphentite and Izuku are facepalming. Even without seeing his eyes, Shoto knows that Jotaro is serious and intends to show him how weak he really is. With a crack of her whip, Midnight gets the attention back to her before announcing the first event. This first event for you hopefuls is this, the obstacle race. Each of you must run through a series of 3 obstacles, as well as competing with each other. Then make it back through the other side of the stadium for your placement for the next event. With the explanation given, Jotaro decides to screw with her and the rest a bit. You said we have to go through the other side, right? Midnight is confused by this but gives an affirmative. Jotaro just sighs and says, okay, you just really don't think like humans anymore, do you? You do realize there is an easy way to win, right? While most are indignant at that statement, Jotaro asks to just give his example. All right, I'm curious what you'll do. Show me what you're thinking of. At that, Jotaro goes up to the start and Midnight gives a fake start with a, go. Jotaro just stands upright and walks over to the finish line. While most are confused and a few are laughing, Midnight asks what he is thinking. Hello. You may have said that the race involves going through the obstacles, but that doesn't mean we have to. And I'm not talking about the business course kids who are just going to duck out anyway. Little tidbit. There are simple solutions to complicated problems. Not everything has to be solved with a stupid flashy entrance or big show of force. Sometimes you have to think outside of the maze. While most everyone in the audience is confused, Aizawa speaks his own mind on the matter. He does have a point. It's not like we all have his or All Might levels of power. Sometimes we have to go around a problem rather than through it. With a sigh, Midnight just says, you make a fair point, but we do need to make this more of a spectacle given. Well, what people have paid for. So please go though the course like the rest. Jotaro just shakes his head and seemingly rolls his eyes before taking his position. With that, Midnight give the signal for the race to begin. The first big obstacle is actually not one of the ones mentioned. But instead, it is the narrow path and hall to leave the interior of the stadium. Most of the students get packed and stuck in it or slip on the ice Shoto made to trip people up and give himself a lead. But a few manage to take the lead by going a different route. Instead of going through the hall, Izuku, Saphentite and Jotaro take a different route. They all go over the stadium, with Izuku and Jotaro taking big leaps and Saphentite flying. Once they land or get closer to the land, they are all a bit ahead of Shoto, who is annoyed that his plan to trip the 3 best up was useless. Bakugo on the other hand is trying to boost himself ahead as best he can with his quirk. He hasn't had the same training as the rest of the hero course, but he still knows how to use his power well. The top 3 though reach the first obstacle before the rest. And here is the first big obstacle for the students, Robo Inferno. The students have to deal with an army of robots to get through to the rest of the course. The same 3 just give each other looks that say, really? Before rushing into them, Saphentite weaves her way through the bots like it is nothing. While Jotaro and Izuku decide to see how far they can send a 0-point bot. They both charge in and punch the robots so hard they fly for almost a mile. With that done, they both work to catch up with Saphentite. Well, that's not entirely surprising. We really should have considered a few other challenges for those three. Aizawa says as the boys catch up with Saphentite. His point is proven more with the second obstacle, the fall. Normally this would be where I would say that they contestants have to cross this impressive gap to move on, but as he's saying that, Saphentite flies right over it and the other two just leap across the entire gap like it's nothing. Yeah, this is seeming like a contest between those three and everyone else is fighting for fourth. Mike says a bit dejected. His point is proven more so at the third obstacle, the minefield. Once again, they all just go over the obstacle entirely rather than through it. With that out of the way, it is more of an actual foot race between the three at the top. Saphentite is still in the lead and boosts herself more by turning into a rocket. This surprises the boys, but they both put out more and run to keep up with her. Izuku had been at most using 15 to 20% of his power, but now he put out about an extra 5% to catch up with her. Jotaro on the other hand hurried as much as he could in his current state. At the end, Saphentite was in first place due to stretching herself out at the last second. Izuku grabbed onto Jotaro's arm and flung himself forward as best he could right as they passed the goal, taking second. With the top three set by the three quirkless, most in the audience were uneasy and unsettled by this turn of events. If the quirkless have that much power and potential, how come they don't use it? Maybe they figure they don't need to because their powers in a lot of ways would get in the way. I mean, lots of quirks are pretty useless in daily life. And even with heroes, most don't have the best powers. They just figure out how to use it. These thoughts and questions, among others, are voiced among the crowd. When the Shoto arrives in fourth place, the look on his face shows he is livid. Not as much as Bakugo, who got to fifth place, but still angry. As the rest of the top 42 file in, someone notes that Mineta had basically stuck himself to the back of Momo. I can't believe he did this. I feel so violated, Momo says in disgust. Mineta, while having a creepy look at first, notices Jotaro glaring at him. He then lets go before saying, while some of that was to kinda get a feel, honestly, I was just trying to make sure I could stay in the race. With as short as I am, I had to improvise. He tapped his fingers together and at least looked somewhat repentant. This doesn't make Momo feel much better. She does at least understand his point and plan. With the next event's participants set, Midnight moves on to explaining what the next event will be. The next event will be a cavalry battle. Students must make teams of up to 4 people, with at least 1 horse and rider. The student in last place will have a headband given to them saying 5 points. And each student above that will have another 5 points added. There is an exception though, and that is first place, which is worth 10 million points. At that statement, all eyes turn to Saphentite, who in turn is not surprised but a bit nervous about what to do. Until Jotaro steps up and nods to her. With that, you all have 15 minutes to decide your teams. Jotaro and Saphentite agree to team up while Izuku is planning to work with Ida, Ochako, and Fumikage for the next event. Bakugo though has no idea who to work with, until Eijiro and Mina come up to him first. Hey man, you may be in the general department, but you've got some good skills and power. How about we team up? Bakugo doesn't know them well but agrees before saying they need one more. He looks around and sees the girl who had came in 6th place behind him and is about to go ask for her help. His initial asking is in his usual aggressive tone, to which Shiozaki Ibara proceeds to smack him once with her vines. As she's walking away, he says, wait. Look, I'm not really good at asking for help or really talking to people. I'm so used to doing everything by myself. But I need help if I'm going to at least get to the next stage and maybe get into the hero course. So, can you help me at least get close to what I hope to do? Shiozaki notices how downtrodden Bakugo seems to be and realizes that she can't turn away from a soul in need despite him probably saying he wasn't that pitiful. All right, I can work with you. I know the rest of my class wants to compete with 1A, but I see this as working with others with the same hope in their hearts. At that Bakugo explains what he has in mind for the cavalry battle. Okay, you guy might see this as a weird set of combinations, but it was about the only way I could make it work. In this case Izuku isn't on top, so Ida could possibly be willing to work with him on moving to the next stage. For Bakugo, I needed a placeholder since I removed Shiro and Shiozaki was a good filler. Plus, given her compassionate nature, she might be willing to help a general ed student get their chance to move up to the hero course. Jotaro POV. This whole thing is completely ridiculous. They are literally doing this whole competition to represent the hero system they made, where the top spot is constantly fought for. In other words, it's for the animals to fight, preen and claw for so they can say they are the best dumb animal or monster. But I know Sahira and I can pass this one by with no problem. I don't need to play by their rules. I'll do the human thing and think around the problem. As I observe around the area and listen outside, I'm realizing more and more of my thoughts are correct on why they are all idiots when it comes down to these matters. It really is like I told Toshinori while we were training Izuku. Flashback. At one point during the martial arts training of Izuku, Toshi and Jotaro had stopped and were watching from the sidelines. You know, I think this may be one of the few instances where I've seen someone focus on fighting technique more than their quirk. For all the years I've been a hero, everyone just focused more and more on their quirks and support gear with it. Jotaro to the side huzz at that statement before asking a question that has been stewing in his mind. Okay Toshinori, I gotta know, how long have you been doing all of this? Doing this hero as you see it thing? How long have you been active? Jotaro says with a look of skepticism at how it could have changed that much. Toshi coughs before saying, I've been active for almost, I think a little over 35 years. Hearing that, Jotaro hums again before speaking his mind more. I'm guessing you've had the power of OFA just a little longer than that. Right. At Toshi's nod, Jotaro goes on to explain what he was thinking. The first point being, if you've been active that long, then that makes sense on why people have lost touch with what it means to be a hero. For starters, thanks to everyone having powers, they think they can do whatever they want. At least at first. Then you show up on the scene and give an idealized version of a hero and screws them up even more. If anything, that Bakugo brat is more representative of the world than we realized. Toshi isn't sure what Jotaro is getting at, so he explains by saying that most everyone stuck with the extremely selfish nature of humans and the quirks dehumanize them even more. Because they all have power in some way, they can't relate to true human selflessness anymore. Let alone those who try to make a combination of quirks better for the next generation. It's why Izuku confuses most people. He still has his humanity. And it scares them. While Toshi doesn't like how he put it, he can't fully deny that people have lost their way. He thought about Endeavor and his obsession with surpassing him, and the rumors about him going through a quirk marriage to make a stronger group of kids down the line. He had focused on making a peaceful world but couldn't see the problems to that behind the scenes. But if what Jotaro had told him about his own abilities was true, then he may be able to. Once OFA fully transferred to Izuku. Flashback end. You're thinking something rude again, aren't you? I hear in my mind as we're getting ready for the second event. Maybe. Don't worry, I won't say anything right away. But you and I both know we're going to school all of these idiots. Even without seeing her face, I know she's rolling her eyes. As Midnight is announcing the planned time for the next event, I can feel all the eyes going toward me. They don't see Sahira, but that is entirely planned. This will really throw them all for a loop. No POV. With a crack of her whip, Midnight announces the start of the cavalry battle. The first thing that happens is Bakugo and Todoroki's teams rushing toward where they saw Jotaro. He's probably acting as the horse and Saphantite is probably invisible. Todoroki thinks while keeping an eye out for other attackers. I'll knock that big guy down a peg with this attack. Bakugo thinks while telling his team to hurry towards where the brick house had been sitting. But once they get there, they all see that he is nowhere to be found. While they are looking around, Izuku's team have instead chosen to focus on others. The first one they take down is Mineta, Asui and Shoji's team. While Shoji did a good covering the two, Izuku managed to find a perfect moment to use something that had slightly awakened for him. He couldn't fully control it, but he managed to snag all 3 of their headbands. Midoriya, what was that? Tokiyami asked as they were running. Izuku coughs a bit before saying it was a new way his power operated. I'm not entirely sure, but it's like I can make the energy I've built up manifest in a few ways. It's not that strange for those like me and Jotaro. And you already know he has a few abilities. While Tokiyami knew Izuku was dodging his question, he pushed it aside for the time being. I'm not sure what you're talking about, but still well done, Midoriya. I'll keep us moving at full speed. Just be ready to defend as needed, Ida announced while pulling his floating partners around. Ochako seemed a bit sick, but a quick pinch behind her ear managed to alleviate some of her issues. Meanwhile, everyone was questioning where Jotaro was. Even Midnight can't see them on the field. It is then that Aizawa speaks up with, "Look up." At that they all see a rug flying in the air. The cameras focus in and show Jotaro sitting down on it without a care in the world. That's cheating. He can't do that. Where's the girl? At a move up with a drone, Power Loader asks a few of the questions they all had. You just said the teams need to have a horse and a rider. You didn't say how we had to handle this. So why would I do the same as the idiots down there? What are you talking about? You're alone up here, Power Loader says through the drone. Jotaro raises his eyebrow and looks down at the carpet he is on. Power Loader points the camera at the rug, and it winks at him. This makes everyone's jaws drop. Saphantite was taking the role of the horse in this situation. Instead of fighting like stupid animals, we went with the human approach to avoiding the unnecessary fights altogether. There's no rule against it. So, back off. More of the audience is disturbed by the audacity this student had, and the students are also mad too. Now it's almost impossible to fight him. Bakugo thinks, and Todoroki is mulling over the same thoughts as he has his team move in on the others. They shake it off and instead decide to focus on the others in the competition. Back in the thick of the action, Juzo quickly softened the ground to throw off more of the teams. If I can't get to the big guy, I'll just eliminate everyone to fight him at the end. Bakugo shouted before leaping and blasting off toward Tetsu's team. As he's lashing out with a small explosion, Saburaba creates a wall of solid air. While it shattered, the wall absorbed the impact and left the temperamental teen open for a metal fist from Tetsu. Shit, Bakugo said before bouncing himself up slightly so he wouldn't hit the ground. Ibara then grabbed him with her vines and pulled him back to safety. You should be more mindful. If you go too far, I might not be able to pull you back in time, the Holy Vine girl says with a disapproving look. The explosive teen snarls and tells her to focus on keeping him in play. She's right, man. We can't help you get further if you take yourself out of the race. Hiroshima warns before taking an attack to his hardened face. Mina then uses her acid to block and then slide around to avoid a different attack. Namely a quick attack from Izuku. He used a Delaware Air Force smash to try and knock Katsuki and his team out, but Mina kept them safe. Deku. Bakugo screamed before leaping up and trying to attack Izuku, only to be struck in the stomach by Dark Shadow. And Ibara again saved him once more. I know. But they're still sitting in second place and could get us a major jump up. He's got a point, but we should probably try for some others. Hiroshima advised before focusing on Monoma's team. Ibara makes a comment about feeling guilty in attacking her classmates. But that is the nature of this battle, she says as she pushes Bakugo up to attack. He shouts out a die while unleashing an explosion but is surprised by the horns that get shot his way. Not enough to stop his attack and he almost hits Monoma. The blonde from Class 1B smirks at the explosive teen before mocking him for how hard he was trying. And when Bakugo attacks again, he gets an explosion to his own face for the trouble. Oh, I get it. Your quirk is all about copying others. Not as strong or impressive as mine is. But a problem, though I can guess how it already works. Unleashes a few more explosions in front of himself while going for the headbands Monoma was guarding. Only for the young man to not notice as two were swiped by Ibara. And then they get knocked around by Kirishima and Mina pushing forward. Clever. I guess I underestimated him because of his status as a general course student. Monoma says before reacquiring Pony's quirk. Shoto's team had taken a more defensive approach as the leader advised that they just needed to stay in the top 5. Even if we drop slightly, I think they'll pull in others for the next round. Jotaro-kun and Safentite-san aren't playing by the normal rules we're accustomed to. Momo noted from the back of the horse. Denki agreed and hoped that their front runner was really up for this. He hasn't been practicing and training with me for no reason. Don't worry about that, Itsuka said while adjusting the position of both of her hands. Her right big hand was directly in front of her team, ready to attack and defend. Shoto meanwhile had a large platform to stand on thanks to Itsuka's quirk. I'm a little surprised you're willing to work with us, given the rivalry of our classes, Shoto said while creating some ice to fight back with. Itsuka shrugged and admitted she really wanted to get to the next stage. And I thought my odds would be best with you or Midoriya. But he already had a full team ready to go. No offense by the way. Todoroki raised an eyebrow at that and said there was some taken. Wonder if this was what he felt at times. Never mind, I have to focus and make sure we stay in good standing, he thinks before advising Momo to get a headband from Toru's group. Sheeta's with a special grapple tool, but their opponents are ready to engage and charge at them. Jiro aiming to push some heartbeat fuzz into Itsuka's hand. Yaoyorozu, think that'll work? Kaminari asks with some worry. It should. Try it now, she calls out while throwing an item forward. Here goes. Time for a little shock, Denki says before unleashing some electricity along towards the item Momo had slapped together. It acted as a lightning rod and Jiro's team got a good jolt from it. Not enough to knock them out, but enough that they were wary of trying again. It wasn't foolproof, however. Still got a little shocked over here, Itsuka says while wincing at the pain from the electricity. Todoroki acknowledged that it was similar for him. But still, good job you two. That got us some space and made others unwilling to. Going down half and half. Shoto heard above him as Bakugo rocketed at him with his explosions. And he'd perfectly timed it to where the group was taken off guard and attacked from Itsuka's slightly weaker side. Kaminari, do it, Momo calls out before quickly creating insulation cloth to cover what she could. The electric team then let off an indiscriminate shock to knock Bakugo back and Ibara had to save him again. Though once again, the insulation wasn't quite enough and Itsuka had to switch hands. We need to move away. Kendo was a bit hurt by that. Todoroki noted before making an ice wall to stop future attacks. As time was winding down, 2 more teams were eliminated and Shinso's team rocketed up into 4th place. While the teams of Monoma and Bondo were eliminated before they could even understand what happened. Reiko meanwhile used her quirk while standing atop Kanoko and Setsuna's hands to pull off a headband from Toru and Rin. Izuku meanwhile had grabbed a headband from Tetsu after an exchange of blows. Mostly by taking advantage of his opponent's dedication to a manly fight, so he wouldn't notice when Izuku sped up his fists a bit to grab the item. I have an idea for something myself Midoriya. Recipro burst. Ida called out before rocketing forward fast enough for Dark Shadow and Izuku to grab a headband from the Kamakiri and Toru teams. And before either could really get their chance, Jiro's team was eliminated by the quick actions of Reiko once again. Bakugo snarled and saw that his team had been put down into the boundary for elimination from the final round. Okay, no going after the big ones. So I go after the others, he thought before instructing his teammates to go for Kamakiri and then the Tetsu teams. But while he made a big show of trying to capture the headbands, it was just a feint. He told Ibara his plan by saying he'd go in first and the other 2 would charge in to catch up. While that's happening, they won't be expecting you to use those weeds of yours to snatch the goals. Let's do this. They are vines, not weeds, Ibara said as Bakugo blasted off. And his plan worked just as he thought it would. He was still upset that they weren't much higher than 5th to 4th, but he was still ready to show everything he had for the final stage fights. And that was just where he was going. As Ibara snatched the headbands, Izuku did the same with his team. You only got 1 headband in that last pass Deku. We got 2. Bakugo called out as Izuku had managed to grab a headband off of Rin with a new burst of speed from Ida. Izuku just smiled at his former friend and pointed to the scoreboard. Maybe. But my team is still in second place, he said with a look that was somehow confident and scared at the same time. Bakugo snarled, looked up to see that his team had gotten into third place with the last 2 headbands. Much to the frustration of Todoroki, as his team was in fourth place. Shinso let out a strained sigh and some tears that his team was in 5th place. And thus unable to move on. Nicely done. And now we can get on with this whole affair, Jotaro said while floating down while atop Saphantite, who quickly transformed and started stretching her back. With that done, and the students gathered again, and they would all take a break for lunch. During this time, Shoto has taken Izuku aside to talk to him about his past, as well as telling him that he will win, no matter what Jotaro and Izuku try to do. Jotaro in the meantime has heard the entire conversation and sighs at acknowledgement that what he assumed about the Todorokis was actually true. That Endeavor had tried to make a new stronger quirk, following a bit of natural selection and specific breeding. And they still want to claim this as the next step in evolution. What a joke, Jotaro thought while eavesdropping on some of the conversation. He managed to keep something of a neutral face, but he was exceedingly tempted to punch Endeavor into space. All right folks, it's time for the main event. The individual battles. Present Mike exclaims and the crowd cheers. Once they have calmed down a bit, he has Midnight take it from there. Well, there is a bit of a problem given the odd number of students thanks to the top team. So, we will be accepting a few others as well. She then gestures to the screen, and the 5th place team and a few others would be allowed to join in the tournament section of the festival. But just as Ojiro, Shota, and Aoyama were being told they could participate, the tailed team stepped forward. I want to pull out of the tournament. As much as I'd like to show what I can do, I don't remember anything of what happened during the cavalry battle. I couldn't really do or show my best last time because I was being manipulated. As he's saying this, he shoots a glare towards the one he was sure caused his lapse in memory, Shinso, who narrows his eyes and still intends to participate in the final round since he had the opportunity. But Ojiro isn't the only one to bow out. Narangeki Shota also asks to resign for much the same reason. Midnight smiles and happily accepts their reasoning and resignations from the finals. That still leaves a few open spots though, and we will fill it with those who were still standing after the cavalry battle. Team Tetsu, Team Yanagi, please select a representative to join in the tournament. Tetsu's smile is huge as his teammates push him forward to continue in their stead and to hopefully win for 1B. Setsuna initially wants to go, but Kanoko convinces her to send Reiko. She did steal a lot of the headbands and keep us in the running, the mushroom girl reasoned with a look to the recommended student. Yeah, I guess you're right. Good luck Yanagi, the lizard girl said with a gentle push of Reiko's back. And with the new members chosen, it was time to announce the matches. Jotaro Svoboda vs Shinso Hitoshi. Todoroki Shoto vs Ida Tenya. Kaminari Denki vs Ibara Shiozaki. Aoyama Yuga vs Ashido Mina. Yaoyorozu Momo vs Tokiyami Fumikage. Tetsu vs Kirishima Eijiro. Kendo Itsuka vs Uraraka Ochako. Saphantite Anwar vs Yanagi Reiko. Midoriya Izuku vs Bakugo Katsuki. With the matches announced, a few were panicking or excited for their upcoming matches. Izuku wasn't sure what to think about facing his bully, but he knew he didn't have a choice. And the sooner I deal with this, the faster we get it over with, Izuku said to himself. Bakugo on the other hand was greatly looking forward to supposedly beating down and taking the place of the person who he felt never belonged there. For some though they could see this as a way to move ahead. Jotaro felt Shinso walk over to him as it was announced that they would be opponents for the first match of the one-on-one battles. He is about to try talking to him when Ojiro interrupts and says, "Hey Jotaro, can we talk?" With a nod, Jotaro follows Ojiro to a distance away from the rest. As Ojiro is thinking over what to say, Jotaro comes out and says, "You're gonna tell me how his power works, right?" Ojiro is shocked but he guesses he shouldn't be given how talented Jotaro had shown himself to be. "Yeah, it happened right after I responded to him. I think he needs that to take over minds." Jotaro hums a bit before saying, "I wondered why you didn't respond much after that." Guess that answers that question. Even without looking, Jotaro can guess what Ojiro is thinking. I listened in on all the conversations he had, including how he got to 5th place in the first place. I was figuring he had to be taking control of people to fight them. He was being a bit smarter about it, but he was still relying on his power. Wait, how did you hear all the conversations? Ojiro asks, confused at how he could have noticed those minute details. Jotaro looks over at Ojiro with an eyebrow raised before saying, "Did I not mention to everyone that I have enhanced senses?" Ojiro facepalms and remembers the USJ incident when he talked about it. He then goes on to ask what Jotaro will do. Don't worry too much. You might actually be surprised on how weak his power is anyway. Jotaro says while making his way to the arena. First up, one of the highest-ranking students on the practical exam and a powerhouse from across the seas, Jotaro Svoboda. At the mention of the first competitor, a few people cheered, but not as much as the earlier announcement. Jotaro considers his match with Shinso as he's walking out into the arena. He's obviously going to try and use his quirk. But I already know it won't work. Quirks are weak and useless as is. I'm just going to show that more. Most still remember the boy as the one who claimed to not have a quirk and was making all of them with quirks look weak. Then he went against what most had come to watch and avoided a big battle altogether by flying above the others. And on the opposite side, the dark horse of the tournament. The sleepy-eyed student from the general ed course, Hitoshi Shinso. With that, there were a few more cheers for him compared to Jotaro, who in turn just rolled his eyes and shook his head. All right, are both competitors ready? At a nod from the two, Midnight called out, then let the first match begin. With that done, most expected Jotaro to go in and push Shinso out of bounds, but instead he just walked toward his opponent slowly, his hands in his pockets. So, you think this will be so easy that you don't have to work at it? Shinso questions. Jotaro just smirks a bit before saying, considering what you can do. Yeah, Shinso smiles and then says, now walk out of the arena. And why would I do that? Shinso stops smiling and looks up at Jotaro and sees that he still has that easy smirk on his face. What the how? I know I used my quirk on you. Jotaro just moves his head around a bit before saying, is that what that little buzzing is? I can feel you trying to poke in, but you definitely won't be taking control. At that, more and more people are astonished by what he is saying. It is in this moment that a few realize what Shinso quirk can do, brainwashing. But how can this guy who says he's quirkless fight back against it? A few heroes and some in the stands ask. To which Jotaro smiles a bit before saying, I'm guessing you've never tried to use this on an actual human, have you? Yes, I have. Everyone in middle. Jotaro stops him by saying, AP. People with quirks don't count. This statement shocks and insults more people, but Shinso on the other hand goes over it in his mind, realizing that no one he has controlled was quirkless. Seems like you're realizing part of it. Most of you probably don't realize this, but when your quirks go active, you basically get a bit of brain damage. At that, more people are shocked and dumbfounded at what he said. Recovery Girl is especially gobsmacked, but then she thinks about the fact that most hadn't looked deeper than the surface with most quirks. If you're wondering how I know this, it's because I sense energy. And the brain shows activity through electrical impulses. I noticed something when I was walking by elementary schools and the like. When kids would have their powers go active, their brains would dim a bit. And it didn't recover at all. At this, more and more people are shocked, and a few doctors decide to test some of what he has said. Shinso on the other hand is confused on Jotaro's capabilities. Then how are you able to do all of the things you can do? I've seen your strength and speed. Let alone how tough you are. Are there other things? Jotaro just nods before saying he also absorbs energy from all around him and can channel that energy in a variety of ways. My power isn't something that was just handed to me like most of you idiots. I only awakened because I was in trouble, and it activated violently. To be honest, I wish I didn't have it most days. Shinso takes offense at this. He goes off on Jotaro saying he has the greatest potential to be a hero, and that he was blessed with his power. This angers Jotaro, so he decides to show him what he means by that. He takes a deep breath, before letting it out and causing a windstorm again. Shinso is blown away and out of bounds, but Midnight can't call it because she is bracing herself as well. The spectators are also panicking as they don't know where this is coming from. Then they start to feel the ground shake. They all think it is just another earthquake, but Shinso notices it first. When he got close to the arena again, he saw that the shaking was in time with each of Jotaro's steps. After a few seconds, Jotaro reins himself in again and the storms and shaking stop. Midnight is getting ready to call the match when Shinso comes up and says, "You caused all of that. How were you doing that?" Everyone in the stands and watching is shocked at what Shinso said. And Jotaro just sighs before saying, "I did all of that, by letting go of the control I have over my strength. That was me letting loose a little bit." This terrifies even more people while Shinso realizes what he meant. As Midnight is calling this Jotaro's win, Shinso says, "You have to constantly rein in your power. Every day is an exercise in control for you. You hold yourself back constantly to keep all of us safe." Jotaro nods before saying, "I don't do it just because it is what a hero should do. I try to remind myself I'm still human. That there is more to me than just my insane power. But the rest of you are all fools or monsters, who are so wrapped up in your powers, they are basically all you can think about. Most of you have forsaken your humanity to gain more, rather than think about wanting less to help others." Shinso is shocked and a bit ashamed of himself for thinking that Jotaro was some big powerhouse who didn't feel like he had to put out. Instead, he was protecting people every day, and holding back an amount of power that would corrupt almost everyone else with a quirk. That was when he did something that surprised even Jotaro. He held out his hand to shake it. Jotaro did with a smile, and they walked off to let the next match commence. For everyone in the stands, however, they were feeling scared and confused. If what that teenager had said was true, then that would mean their quirks were hurting them more than some of the side effects they knew of. For Endeavor, however, he felt this boy was going to be a big problem for Shoto. It's like looking at another version of All Might. And that boy says he doesn't have a quirk. Maybe there's more potential there than we realize. While he is going over those thoughts, Izuku is realizing that this could have greater effects down the line. But for now, the next match is about to begin. As Jotaro and Shinso walked away from the arena, the audience were reacting in a variety of ways. For some pro-heroes, they praised Shinso for his quirk and potential as a hero. The Gen Ed students were also praising Shinso for getting as far as he did during the event. For a few, they were both impressed and intimidated by Jotaro's power and potential. "We're really lucky that the kid wants to be a hero. If he went villain, I doubt any of us could stop him. But do the quirkless really have that much potential? Why haven't we seen it at all during this quirked age?" a hero in the stands asked. "It probably is a minor genetic thing. Different from quirks in pure power, but less easy to activate. There could be other factors too, like a type of energy or an accident that has to trigger it." While most of the audience was musing over these thoughts, Endeavor decided to talk with his greatest creation before his next match. "Not gonna write this part since most of us know how it would go, even with Tenya's speed." Jotaro had heard the conversation the estranged father and son duo had and wasn't surprised when Todoroki created a massive wall of ice to freeze Ida. "Well, that's to be expected," Jotaro and Izuku said. When they said that, their classmates looked at them in confusion. Jotaro didn't feel like explaining, so Izuku said, "I saw that look on his face. He was extremely angry about something. So, it's no surprise he went overboard." But with that match out of the way, and the ice getting melted off due to both of the resident hotheads, the next matches could get underway. Again, not writing the next 4 since they are about the same as canon. During Denki and Aoyama's matches, Jotaro, Saphentite and Izuku were all just shaking their heads. It's really no surprise they lost. Once again, they put too much focus on their power alone. Denki might have been able to do something, if he hadn't gone straight for the big flashy show. Saphentite said with an annoyed look on her face. Izuku agreed and said that Aoyama was much the same. He focuses too much on his power and not on how to actually fight. It doesn't do you much good to have a big blast of energy, and then be useless when the fight gets up close. For Momo and Tokiyami's match, they all saw that matter in a different light. Jotaro spoke up first with, she's thinking too much and not enough at the same time. She has skill and potential in a lot of ways, but she kept looking at the match as a fight and only a fight. She could have maneuvered and made a few things to trick Tokiyami, but she only focused on fighting with her body alone. And get your mind out of the gutter, Mineta. As he said that last bit, Jotaro turned and gave the resident perv a look that almost made him wet himself. No one had an opinion on the match between the two solid body students, but Jotaro did give them credit for a good match of both power and hand-to-hand. Izuku and Safentite though were thinking they could probably suggest a few hand-to-hand styles for the two to study. It was suggested that they could have a tie-breaker match, but this was what they had to say. From Ajiro, we could have a match, but I'd like to earn it a bit more. I'll take him on again next year. And I'll show the fruits of my passion and grit there. Tetsu was much the same, saying, it was a good fight, but really neither of us has much different about the way we fight. At least for now, even our physical strength isn't that different. So I also want to take him on, after we've both learned a bit more about ourselves and what we can do. At hearing this, Midnight gave a joyous shout of, youth, and accepting their withdrawals from the tournament. For the next match though, Jotaro was curious on how well Itsuka could handle Ochako's quirk. As the two stepped into the ring, both girls looked to the stands and saw two from their course who had impressed them. Ochako looking to Izuku, who was furiously writing things in his notebook, with a smile on her face. She had seen how he had pushed himself and persevered even through broken bones. How he had a large amount of power but didn't let it corrupt or control his kind heart. With a quick wake-up slap to her cheeks, she gave her opponent a serious and determined look. Itsuka on the other hand looked to Jotaro and saw that he was looking in her direction as well. She had been impressed with him on his power of course, but also at how he restrained himself from using most of it. And she also liked how he chose to focus on martial arts as well. Both to accentuate his power, and to make sure he wouldn't always need it. Which was why she wasn't planning to use her big fist powers to fight. After getting a nod from Jotaro, Itsuka took a deep breath and took her stance. Both competitors ready, begin, Midnight shouted. With that both girls rushed toward each other. Ochako quickly went for a grab to use her quirk, but Itsuka was ready for it. She quickly grabbed Ochako's wrist, raised it up before sliding in right next to her, and throwing Ochako over her shoulder. Ochako was surprised and winded by the attack but didn't let it discourage her. She got back up and rushed at Itsuka again. This time though, she didn't go straight for the grab. Instead, as she got closer, she removed her gravity and floated above Itsuka, who in turn was taken off guard as Ochako kicked her in the head as she went by. Itsuka was dazed, but quickly shook it off. This is nothing compared to some of the hits Jotaro used against me during our sparring. I can do this. Ochako grit her teeth and swallowed down a bit of nausea. I have to keep throwing her off. But why isn't she using her quirk? Unless Ochako decides to wait till after the match to ask Itsuka, who decides to attack herself. Ochako comes at her too, and both meet with a few blows. Ochako is still trying to grab Itsuka to take advantage of her quirk. But Itsuka knows this and keeps deflecting her blows. She even gets in a few counter punches and hits. Due to this, Ochako is getting more and more exhausted. But she pulls it together for one last attack. She goes for a grab on Itsuka, and it lands, for the most part. She has Itsuka around her waist and her gravity has been removed. But she was still ready for all of it. As she is floating up, she grabs Ochako's arms before headbutting her. This dazes Ochako and Itsuka takes her and throws her out of the arena. Once Ochako realizes that she was out of bounds, she starts to cry. I was so close. I almost had her. Yeah, you did, but I wasn't just ready for it. I had a feeling how the flow of the fight would go from the start. Do you mind letting me down? As she is saying that an Ochako is returning her gravity, Midnight announces her the winner. Itsuka walks down and helps Ochako up and offers to walk her to Recovery Girl. While most in the audience are cheering, a few were confused on part of the battle. How come the Kendo girl didn't use her quirk? Did she think it wasn't necessary? Guess that shows that 1B is better than 1A. That last bit most people just give a scathing look to the one who said it. In this case Monoma, And since Kendo isn't there to reprimand him, Tetsu does it in her place. On the way to the nurse, Ochako asks why Itsuka didn't use her quirk to fight. It's something Jotaro said, our powers should complement our styles of fighting. Most would assume I just use big punches and grab people and throw them around. But like this I can take down I wanted to say villain, but that is wrong. If I can take down a thug with just martial arts, then I can reduce the damage that I could cause. Ochako nods at this and realizes she needs to put more into the way she fights. Maybe I should look into a dojo later to train with. That or do like you did and train with Jotaro. Itsuka smiles a bit wider and says goodbye to Ochako as they reach the nurse. Ochako wishes Itsuka luck with her next match and takes some time to rest. While this has been happening, Reiko and Saphentite are waiting in the arena. Now then for our next competitors, the Spectre of Class 1B, Yanagi Reiko. And her opponent, the crafty genie of Class 1A, Saphentite Anwar. While most were cheering at the announcement, others had mixed feelings. Some were questioning what he meant by a genie, thinking it was just a quirk. Others were remembering that the girl was the first place winner twice. Though the second time they found it insulting since she and her partner avoided the battle. When Midnight signaled to start, Reiko quickly used her power to grab Saphentite and throw her out of the ring. Before she got there though, Saphentite floated in the air and got back into the arena. This went on for a few more times before Saphentite finally got close and used a combo of kicks to knock Reiko around. But the ghost wasn't going to give up that easy. As she was rolling out of the ring, she used her power on herself. She had never really tried it before, but now was as good a time as any. She did succeed, but it taxed her greatly. She floated back into the ring and tried once again to throw Saphentite out. But the genie had figured out a different weakness of her quirk and disappeared. Reiko was worried now. She couldn't see her target, so she couldn't lift and throw her. Reiko was looking around desperately for any tell, but Saphentite wasn't giving her a chance. She decided to finish the bout with one last combo of kicks to Reiko's head. After the fourth kick, Reiko went down. Midnight checked the ghost girl over before announcing, Yanagi is unconscious. The winner is Anwar. This gets a few cheers and a round of applause for the two competitors. But now, it was time for Izuku to face his demons and fears. He knew exactly how Katsuki would fight, and he knew himself and how he could fight. All that was left was to put the two together and win. I'll have to save the new trick of mine for later though. I'll probably need it for facing Safi or Jotaro. Before the match though, Izuku had taken some time to meditate and connect more with his true meta power and the quirk one for all. With his mind centered and path clear and set, he headed to the arena. Katsuki on the other hand is trying to think of what to do to face off with Izuku. Deku is still supposed to be quirkless, but he's like that big guy. That means he'll have a crazy amount of power. I have to finish this fast. If he gets any time to read me, I'm done. With that thought out of the way, he too heads for the arena. When they both arrive, there is a new cheer as Present Mike announces both of them. Now then, for the last match of the first round, it's another dark horse from the Gen Ed department. The explosive maniac, Bakugo Katsuki, and his opponent, both grew up in the same middle school, but this one made it to the hero course. The top scoring applicant from the entrance exam, and a quirkless powerhouse akin to Swaboda, Midoriya Izuku. At the mentioning of his quirklessness, Izuku just rolled his eyes before focusing on Katsuki, who in turn was intimidated by the look in his former victim's eyes. He had never seen Izuku without a look of fear or worry. You think you'll be winning this, you damn Deku? Katsuki shouts out as Midnight is about to start the match. Izuku on the other hand is calm and just takes a breath before saying, I don't think. I know. That incises Katsuki more, and with the announcement of the start of the match, he rockets toward Izuku, who catches his big right swing and throws him on the ground so hard, it cracks, and Katsuki coughs up some spit. As he is bouncing up, Izuku follows this up with a kick to Katsuki's side. The explosive blonde manages to stop just short of the edge, but he can tell he's pretty hurt from just that attack alone. What the hell? I don't think he even used his quirk. Or whatever it is. He just hit me with standard martial arts. Does he think he'll win with just that alone? At finishing that thought, Katsuki blasts himself forward again, and Izuku has a feeling on what he's going to do next. Katsuki feints with a right again and blasts himself over Izuku. As he's coming over, he tries to unleash a huge blast. There's just one problem. Izuku isn't there anymore. All of the sudden Katsuki is kicked in the groin from above. Izuku waited for when he figured Katsuki would be focused on where he was and struck. While most in the audience are groaning at the hit, Katsuki has a different mentality. Damn you, you went for a cheating cheap shot. No rule against it. Besides, you guys are all about the idea of the strong winning. It's a better idea to be smart when it comes to winning. Izuku says calmly before going in with a kick to Katsuki's head and a few body blows with his fists. But he still gets carried away though. After a few hits Katsuki has recovered enough that he can unleash a strong blast. This knocks Izuku back a fair distance, and Katsuki tries to capitalize on it. He gets off one more big explosion, that does some damage. But not only is Izuku still standing, he unleashes a 10% Detroit Smash. This blow sends Katsuki flying again. He still rights himself, but he is hurting. Well, it's not like you are gonna be in better shape. I'll win, Katsuki says to himself. Then his jaw drops when the burns and other injuries on Izuku's body start to heal. Izuku again just calmly stands up and walks back toward where he started. This irritates Katsuki more and more, because none of what he has done even seems to have affected Izuku. But what Izuku does next really sends him into a blind rage. Izuku seems to be bouncing from one foot to the other, and then bring his hand up and gives Katsuki an "bring it" hand taunt. So of course, Katsuki does just that, and blasts as fast as he can toward Izuku. And right as he's into the big right swing again, unleashing an explosion, Izuku dodges by bending backwards at the hip to where he is parallel with the ground. Katsuki's blow misses and then he sees the smile on Izuku's face. Izuku proceeds to flip kick hard down on Katsuki's back, slamming the teen's face into the ground. He then follows up with a body blow kick to the stomach, and as Katsuki is rolling from the hit, Izuku gets behind him and unleashes another powerful kick to the head. Again, Katsuki is rolling and as he is coming up again, Izuku is right in front of him. And he unleashes a 20% Kansas smash to Katsuki's face. The blow breaks his nose and a few other parts of his face and sends him flying again, and making his body spin around and around. And it is over because Katsuki flew back and impacted on the wall of the arena. Of course, Katsuki himself doesn't fully know this. He was unconscious right after the blow. That's it. Midoriya Izuku is the winner. There are some cheers, but more are unsettled by the fact that another quirkless person won. They had told themselves for so long that quirkless were weak. And now, 3 of them were showing impressive results against those with quirks. Man, Midoriya was so badass and manly with that fight. Even when that Bakugo guy managed to get a hit out, he recovered fast and still hit back hard. Hiroshima says, pumping his fists in the air. Tetsu agrees but says, it was kind of a low blow with that shot to the groin earlier. Jotaro just snorts as he's walking out to get ready for the next match. Tetsu is confused so Saphantite gives her own thoughts. It's not so much a cheap shot as it is a smart tactic. I've done it before, so has Jotaro, and we've both also used some dirty shots against women too, be it going for their groin area as well or grabbing the beeps to throw them off. Some of the girls seem scandalized that Jotaro would do that. Saphantite just points out, if you are in a real fight, you should go for whatever you have to for a win. Villains and thugs aren't going to play fair. And while you may want to be above them in terms of morality, there is rarely a right side in a fight. And especially not in a war. There are a few from both classes who are intimidated by her words, but a few realize she does have a point. But that isn't what most in the stands are worried about. Instead, they are focused on the next 2 competitors. The fight between Jotaro and Todoroki. Shoto had already taken his place in the arena, and Jotaro was headed to the same place. Before he got there though, Izuku stopped him. You know Endeavor is probably going to make some big deal about fighting Todoroki all outright. Izuku asked and continued upon Jotaro's nod. I know you can beat him like it's nothing. But, I think you should remind him of something that I think everyone here forgets. And it's something I forget at times too. And what would that be? Jotaro asks with a look to his student and friend. Izuku takes a breath before reciting what he'd been considering telling Shoto as well. To remind the boy that his power may have come from endeavor, but it was still truly his power. Not something his father could control. Just him. Jotaro felt moved by Izuku's words and smiled down at him. Yeah, I think that will be just what he needs. I was so focused on beating him, that I missed something important. With a fist bump and nod, the pair separated in preparation for the match. As Jotaro was going through the tunnel he sighed because he knew who else was there. In the middle of the tunnel was Endeavor, who wanted a quick word with him. You have impressive power, boy. And to think, it's because you don't have a quirk. Perhaps there is more there than we thought. I don't think I have to tell you to give it your best against my Shoto. My greatest creation, because I'm quite sure you'll do that anyway. Jotaro just snorts angrily before saying, did you forget he is alive in his own person? He's not you, and I'm not All Might. Maybe pull your flaming head out of your ass before you start spouting off more crap. As far as I'm concerned, you're just a dumb animal that should have been put down a long time ago. At Jotaro calling him an animal, Endeavor is incised, his flames rising, and tries to say something. But he can't. As Jotaro felt the heat raise, he rushed back, grabbed Endeavor by the throat, and lifted him up into the air. You want to make something of it? Why don't you face me in the arena after I beat your boy? Because trust me, he will lose. Even if he uses both sides. At that Jotaro drops Endeavor, who is sputtering and coughing as the young man walks off. Present Mike then announces, and there he is folks. The brick house of 1A. Jotaro Svoboda. With both standing in the arena, Midnight waits for an affirmative from both before shouting, begin. Right away Todoroki unleashes a huge wave of ice at Jotaro, who in turn doesn't even move. He just stands with his arms crossed. Once the attack is done, Midnight is about to call it Todoroki's victory when everyone hears a cracking. They all see cracks forming all around the ice until it shatters completely. And Jotaro is still just standing there like nothing happened. Todoroki ups the amount of ice and freezes Jotaro in place a few more times, before he asks, how do you keep breaking my ice? You can't even move in most of those cases. Jotaro just smirks before saying, I'll hold my arm out to show you. Just freeze it if you really want to know. Todoroki and the crowd are confused, but the fire and ice boy does just unleash a wave that freezes Jotaro's arm. Phew, that is fairly cold. Now then, Jotaro says with a little smirk, before flexing and breaking all of the ice around his arm. He's just flexing, in more than one way. Seriously, how is he supposed to fight against that? Are the common things said around the arena and even from the commenters. Jotaro still has a smile on his face and takes a few slow steps forward. Todoroki uses as much ice as he can to trip Jotaro up, but he either smashes through it or stomps and disrupts his waver path. Damn it, I'm getting too cold, but I can't use my fire. I won't. Todoroki thinks rapidly. He tries to change up his attacks by maneuvering around and striking Jotaro from a few angles to throw him off. But he dodges or counters every wave of ice he sends his way. I'm not gonna make a boring or predictable crack here, because I'm pretty sure you already know that. You can't win by going at half. You aren't like me who has to hold back. You're doing this out of spite. And that won't save people. That'll just get more killed. So, give me your best shot. Let's see what you can do. After hearing that, Todoroki asks if his father put him up to that. Who cares about that stupid and worthless waste of space? I already kicked his ass earlier. At hearing that everyone is confused. It is then a video appears on screen, and they see Endeavor talking with Jotaro. At hearing what Jotaro called him, and then both men's responses to said action, more people are terrified of what Jotaro can do. Shoto on the other hand is amazed that Jotaro challenged his father without batting an eye. The larger teen though raises an eyebrow towards Saphantite who had subtly made cast some magic to project what happened. Why do you want me to use it? Todoroki asked between shivering. Because you have the capability to go beyond anything your old man could hope to do. This is your life, not his. And it's your power. He can't control it, only you can. And only you can decide the kind of hero that you want to be. Jotaro says with a calm look on his face. A few other hero students are impressed by what he said and that it was fairly inspirational. Shoto on the other hand starts thinking back to his mother and some of what she had said. Make your powers your own. You are not a prisoner of your bloodline. Remembering that, Shoto's left side engulfs itself in flames. Jotaro just smiles while everyone in the stands is terrified by the amount of flames coming out of the arena. When Endeavor starts to talk about the fact that Shoto has embraced his fire, Jotaro winds up and unleashes a shockwave punch that sends him into a wall. Shut up, you dumb animal. This is between him and me. You want to fight? You come down here yourself and see where that leads you. Now then, bring it, Jotaro says with an angry look at first, then a challenging look. Don't blame me for what happens, Shoto shouts as he unleashes a powerful burst of fire. The whole of the arena then explodes from the contrasting temperatures. There's no way that kid could have taken that. Man, that was crazy. Are the various things heard around the stands? When Present Mike asks what happened, Aizawa explained that the rapid heating of the super-cooled air caused it to expand and unleash a huge, superheated blast. What is up with your kids, Aizawa? Mike exclaims, while they are waiting for the steam and smoke to clear. When it finally does, they notice that Shoto had been blown back. But he stopped himself short of the edge. On the other hand, Jotaro hasn't even moved from the spot he was standing at before. While everyone is freaking out and trying to understand what happened, Izuku points it out first. Look at his feet. At that a few nearby and eventually the camera focuses in on the ground. Jotaro had pushed his feet into the ground and braced himself from the explosion. While everyone is still reeling from that, Jotaro cracks his neck before saying, not bad. But this is done. At that he pulls his feet out and rushes so fast no one can see him. He appears in front of Shoto, grabs his shirt and throws him out of the arena. While there are some who are complaining about an anticlimactic end to an impressive fight, more are stunned by what happened. He could have ended this easily. You saw how fast he moved, why didn't he do that in the first place? One pro watching from the stands asked. Another said, it was almost like he was trying to save him. Not fight him. While everyone is still confused, the matches must continue. And after Midnight has called Jotaro the winner, he helps up Shoto in a sign of good sportsmanship. As they are walking, Jotaro can sense Endeavor heading toward them. Before the man can say something, he says to Shoto, you stopped thinking about him, didn't you? In that last attack, you finally realized it. That everything about him wasn't important. Right, Jotaro says with an easygoing smile. Shoto just looks down and agrees. Now it's time I decide what kind of hero I am. Endeavor had been stopped at hearing that, and right as he was about to say something, Jotaro turned around quickly and unleashed another shockwave punch. What was that? Shoto asked. Jotaro covered up by saying, I guess it was nothing. Thought I heard a rat. While most were still reeling from the match that just happened, others were wondering if Endeavor would answer that challenge. Shouldn't that kid be in trouble as well? Doesn't what he did to Endeavor count as assault? One person questioned. A pro in the stands said, it's a bit gray here. Because yeah, he attacked Endeavor. But Endeavor was the one who looked like he was ready to attack him as well. If anything, the kid was just reacting or responding to being threatened. For the students though, more of them were questioning if they could even compete with Jotaro. But for the time being, the next matches had to get underway. Now then, it's time for the second match of round 2. From Class 1A, we have the acidic pink ball of energy, Ashido Mina. And from Class 1B, the green garden goddess, Shiozaki Ibara. Present Mike exclaimed, as the cheers went up around the arena. But Shiozaki corrected Mike again. I take umbrage with you calling me a goddess. There is only one god. Mike again groaned at what her correcting him but moved past it. Midnight then brings attention back down before announcing the start of their match. Mina decides to get a jump on the Vine Girl by skating as fast as she can toward Shiozaki, who in turn tries to stop and restrain Mina the same way she did against Denki. But Mina knows this is what she is aiming for. I may not be a genius fighter like the top 3, but I know to change it up when it comes to my abilities. Mina continually shows her quick reflexes and skill with her quirk during her fight, dissolving and dodging most of Shiozaki's attacks. For the Vine user though, she is having trouble since Mina has melted through her defenses twice and keeps pushing her back. When she notices that she is right up against the edge of the ring, she stops herself. But this was what Mina was waiting for, and skated as fast as she can toward her opponent. Shiozaki lashes out with one last wave of vines. But Mina melts through them and kicks her opponent out of the ring. As Midnight is announcing the winner, Mina is smiling and dancing around in celebration. Shiozaki on the other hand is a bit sad that she couldn't make it further. "Hey, you were really great out there. You really kept me on my toes," Mina said to the Vine girl before stepping down next to her. She also admitted that the fight could have gone either way. With that said, Shiozaki feels a bit better and tells Mina, perhaps this is how it was meant to play out. No one knows all of the plans. While Mina doesn't understand, she still takes what Shiozaki said as a compliment. In the stands though, Jotaro and Saphentite are thinking of training and teaching Mina. She's got some good potential for a few different styles. Capoeira especially, Saphentite says. Jotaro also points out that, with her flexibility she could probably learn a yogi style as well. A few around him are confused by that as they think of yoga as stretching exercise. It still has functions as a martial art. You just have to be creative about it. For the next match though, everyone is wondering how the big fist fighter is going to match up against a competitor with a strong living shadow. This won't be easy, but I'm betting he may have the same weakness as Shiozaki. Itsuka thinks to herself as she's walking into the arena. Tokiyami on the other hand is interested to see how she'll face him. She seems to want to focus on her hand-to-hand skills. And frankly I'm extremely impressed by that. Most of us in heroics would only care about our quirks, but she sees potential elsewhere. Much like Jotaro and Midoriya. With both competitors in the arena, and present Mike's silly titles and commentating done, the match can begin. Tokiyami wastes no time and calls out, "Dark Shadow." With said entity rushing from his body at Itsuka. The marital artist nods as she runs at the creature. While most are confused, a few can see what she has in mind. Right as Dark Shadow is about to strike her, she slides under his claws. She gets in close to Tokiyami and lets off a combo of blows. Tokiyami does block a few of them, but he still gets hit hard. So he recalls Dark Shadow to aid him. But this is what Itsuka was waiting for. Right as Dark Shadow is getting close, she backflips and kicks the shadow in the head. The disorienting blow makes the creature careen into Tokiyami, knocking them both out of the ring. Ring out. The winner is Kendo Itsuka. Midnight announces. Those who were watching were impressed by the strategy and insight the martial artist had. Others were wondering again why she didn't use her power, and also comparing her match to Momo's. The later comparison brings down Momo's confidence a bit more. The quirkless students though are each impressed by her skill and technique during the fight. With Jotaro being especially proud of his student. And while Monoma is about to start bragging, Shiozaki takes a moment to pick him up with her vines and slam him on the ground. Don't forget I lost to a 1A student. If you truly wish to be a hero, you need to put this grudge of yours aside. The green-haired girl said before the slam. The next match though is important to the competitors for a few different reasons. The main one being that it is a match between teacher and student. Saphentite though said something to Izuku before the match began. Let's fight this match with just our martial arts skills. I know you want to give it your all, with all of the power and skill you have, but I think that competition will come later. Besides, my powers kinda make it unfair. Izuku wants to disagree, but he knows she has a point. So, with both competitors ready, they start in on the match. They both are moving slowly compared to what most of the audience was expecting. Some even noted that Saphentite wasn't flying. Any thoughts, Aizawa? I'm betting the two of them have no intention of using their powers. This is just a fight between martial artists. While this is being said and the crowd is upset by it, the fight continues, ignoring the distractions around them. Izuku had drawn first blood, after both had blocked most of the blows they had exchanged, when he got a feint hit in. striking Saphentite in the stomach and sending her back. He then followed up with a few more hits on her body and knocking her on her back. Once she had recovered, she replied with a few kicks and a powerful knee to Izuku's nose. This of course bloodied it, but he pressed on with his fight. Aizawa decided to explain some of the reasoning they had. From what I understand, Jotaro and Saphentite trained Izuku in not just how to use his power, but also in combat and martial arts. Jotaro even took the time in the lead up to the festival to train and spar with kendo. My guess, they see this as a match between student and teacher. So, they intend to fight and prove their capabilities in this way. Most don't understand what Aizawa is talking about, but a few of the pros have an idea. Thinking back on their own internships and mentors. For some though, they notice that the match is taking a dirty turn as Saphentite decides to give Izuku a punch to the groin after doing the splits. Izuku winces and leaves enough of an opening for Saphentite to kick him a few times. He rolls away and gets closer to the edge intentionally. Saphentite bets he is trying to go for a throw and doesn't get close enough. Using punches instead of kicks that Izuku might be able to capitalize on. After blocking a few hits, Izuku decides to take a dirty initiative himself. After deflecting a punch, he quickly reaches out and grabs Saphentite's beeps, pinching them and making her shriek a bit. While Saphentite is distracted, Izuku gets behind her and pushes her out of the ring. There are a few who are not sure if this could be called his win. Saphentite is the one to respond. With a big laugh she congratulates Izuku, saying, "You did the right thing going for the grab. It threw me off and gave you the opening you need. Well done. You earned the win." With the match done, the semifinal round of matches can get underway. Mina is a tad intimidated by the person she is up against, but she resolves to do the best she can. Jotaro on the other hand decides to do similar to what his students and partner have done. "I'll take her on without using my strength. At least as best I can. Her acid might not be able to do much to me, but I'm interested to see how she handles a fight with me." With those thoughts and plans set, both make their way to the ring. When midnight announces for the match to begin, both rush to the center to meet for their bout. Mina is confused at why Jotaro didn't just go all out and push her away quickly, but she puts that aside and tries an overhead kick to his head. Jotaro blocks and when he pushes her off goes for a punch to her stomach. But Mina nimbly maneuvers out of the way of the hit. She does land awkwardly, but she'll take what she can get. Jotaro then goes at her with a few more solid punches and kicks, but Mina avoids most of them. She does take a solid kick to the stomach that knocks the wind out of her, but she still manages to dodge when Jotaro tries to follow it up. "I didn't think I'd have to use some of my other skills, but I hope you're ready," Mina shouts as she starts into a quick rhythm, before spinning on her back and unleashing her acid everywhere. Jotaro dodges most of the acid, but some of it splashes on his shirt and pants. And he does take a bit of a hit from a kick Mina had spun into. But this hurts her more. "Ow, man, it's like trying to kick steel with you." Jotaro just shrugs before surprising her, with getting into a rhythm of his own. He comes in at her with a mix of punches, before feinting with a big kick. From that kick, he goes into a handstand and unleashes a combo of spinning kicks. When Mina tries to counter, he drops down onto his back and starts spinning around again before rising up with an uppercut. This catches Mina in the jaw and sends her up into the air. Before she comes back down, Jotaro bounces back and forth a bit before performing a spinning jump up into the air and using a powerful kick to her stomach. When she hits the ground, Mina is unconscious. As Midnight is announcing the winner, Jotaro goes over and picks Mina up bridal style and carries her to Recovery Girl. When he gets there, said nurse asks him a question. "You didn't use your powers for the most part against her, did you? Any reason why?" As she is asking this, Mina has started to wake up. Jotaro just sighs before saying, "It's not exactly fair in a lot of ways to fight against me. I can dish out and take pretty much everything they can all do. But I respected the way she thought through her fight with Shiozaki and me. She knew she may not be able to get through my defense, but she was still willing to give it her all. And who knows, maybe me and Safi will have some new students after all of this." With that said and done, Jotaro takes his leave. Mina on the other hand had a light purple tint to her face. Who knew he could be kinda sappy? Maybe he's not as bad as some of us had thought. With that match done, it is time for the second match of the semifinals. When Itsuka and Izuku come to the ring, they both try to say something to each other. After a bit of goofy back and forth, they both finally say, "Let's both not use our powers for this." At saying that, the audience is confused again, until Itsuka explains. "I've seen how you fight a few times. Both in this tournament and in the training to get ready for this event. We both learned from experts in various fighting styles, and I want to face you as students of similar masters." Izuku nods and says much the same. Midnight herself is quite impressed and tells them she will call a loser if they use their powers in any way. Present Mike tries to speak counter to this, but Aizawa supports the idea, saying, "It's a good idea. These two want a match as martial artists. This isn't about quirks or meta powers for them. It's about a match about equal fighters, and wanting to see who has the greater skill." With that said and both fighters ready, the match begins. Both start with a mix of blows from kicks to punches, and some chops and open hand strikes from Itsuka. They each manage to land a few solid hits to each other's bodies. When Izuku went in for a strong kick, Itsuka caught it and threw him down and away. He stopped before the edge of the ring, but Itsuka was on him fairly quickly. But he threw her off, with a headbutt to her stomach and then a tackle. At which point he mounted her and started punching her face and body. Itsuka took a few hard hits before she threw Izuku off, and then caught another of his strikes and used that to lay into him a few more times. This continued for some time. By the time 10 minutes had passed, both fighters looked more worn out and beat down compared to all of the previous matches. Itsuka had a black eye and bloody nose from a few punches and a failed headbutt. Izuku also had a black eye and was having trouble moving his right leg after a solid blow from Itsuka. "I can't use the capoeira or other rhythm forms, but I think I can still feint her out," Izuku thinks as he is coming up with a plan. Itsuka on the other hand knows they are coming down to the last exchange of blows and is hoping to finish this with one last attack. They start toward each other slowly, before finally committing to the attack. Itsuka thinks Izuku is going for a few punches and hammer fist strikes and readies to counter. But instead, Izuku uses that to start his momentum before spinning into a handstand and using a few kicks Itsuka wasn't ready for. He finishes by grabbing her leg and throwing her off balance, before flipping into a strong downward kick to the head. Even as she is passing out, Itsuka has a smile on her face. "I gave it my all. He was simply better this time." Both fighters are on their backs, but Izuku manages to sit up after a minute. Midnight gives a big cheer and announces Izuku as the winner. It's rare to see a purely martial arts match before. And now we've seen two. Yeah, it's different, but it is still impressive to see. As the audience is saying this, in the 1B stands Monoma is trying to claim that Izuku used his power during the last attack, but before Jotaro can get up to punch the little shit down, his own classmates decide to do it instead. With Tokage giving him a double punch to the groin, Tetsu punching him in the face, Shiozaki picking him up and slamming him down again, and Pony launching her horns and pinning him to the wall. "We're seriously getting tired of your bullshit, man. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all," Tetsu says before sitting down. Jotaro gets up from his spot to get ready for the last match but decides to add a joke himself. He basically has to become mute. "I don't think he has the capability to be nice to anybody outside of you guys." A few get a chuckle out of that, and Jotaro decides to do one other thing when he gets to the arena. "Okay folks, it's time for the final round of the UA Sports Festival. And for the final match we have the pair of powerhouses from Class 1A. Jotaro Svoboda and Midoriya Izuku. While there are a few cheers, Jotaro can tell there's some who are uncomfortable with the idea that it's two quirkless individuals who are at the top of the competition. But he decides to say one other thing first. "Hold up, has everyone just forgotten that I told Endeavor if he wants a fight, I'll take him on anytime? That offer still stands. You think your quirks are the next step. Why don't you come down and try to prove it? Or are you afraid I'm right and you're just evolving and are nothing more than a fiery animal?" At that statement, the heat from Endeavor's flames rises and he looks livid. For the audience though, They are wondering if the teenager is crazy and are concerned about the idea that he could be right. The mentality of the world may change with the decision made here. For those who may have been wondering about the Kansas smash, it is a kick smash. Izuku spins himself around a few times and unleashes a powerful roundhouse kick to the head that sends the opponent spinning. Also, am I doing alright with the description of some of the fights? I'm still not sure about my writing at times. So next chapter might be the Endeavor beatdown. Still considering it. Izuku was just facepalming as Jotaro made that challenge to Endeavor. Said challenger was looking up toward the stands, where he could feel the heat from the arrogant hothead. Endeavor on the other hand was having a bit of an internal dilemma. If I answer his challenge, there is a chance I could lose. Also, even if I could win, there would be some who see it as me attacking a child. But if I don't answer him, not only will the civilians think I'm afraid, but villains will as well. I guess I don't have a choice. Endeavor calms his flames before taking a breath. With that he says, "All right boy. I'll face off with you. I hope you're ready." With his accepting of the challenge, there are plenty in the stands who are excited. Oh man, the number 2 is going to show how strong quirks really are. Yeah, that kid may have durability, but Endeavor has gotten through tough opponents before. While many are voicing that opinion, there are a few others who are concerned at what the results could spell. For All Might, he saw this as breaking down some of the peace he had created. But it may help other matters in the long run. I had started looking into some of the mistreatment and abuse of quirkless people, and it is much worse than we thought. With this, maybe it will stop. Though it will be out of fear. For both Izuku and Saphentite, though, they had a different thought. Mainly thinking they will have to deal with a lot of the fallout to this whole matter. When Endeavor gets down to the arena, he notices that Jotaro is taking off his gym jacket. What are you doing? This isn't a match between students. It's supposed to be between heroes, right? So, I gotta use my costume. Jotaro says with a smirk. When he has taken off his undershirt, there are quite a few who have wide-eyed opinions on his appearance. For the men, they see a young man with a physique and build equal to All Might. Some of whom are attracted by it. For some of the women, a fair number are drooling at the sight of a young man with a very impressive build. Midnight herself is staring quite intently. Era. Quite the impressive specimen we have here. But don't you have to get your suitcase with your uniform? She asks. Jotaro in turn just smiles, before taking a breath. He then has a look of intense concentration across his face and appears to be flexing his upper body. Then, with a crackle of electricity and a shout, Jotaro's upper uniform shirt is seen. The black shirt with red lines outlining a pair of white Libra scales, seems to shimmer in the sun. There we go. Now then. How did you do that? Endeavor shouts, and most of the audience is confused as well. Jotaro just sighs before saying, "I ran a charge through the air around my body and ionized the air. I can only make the shirt so far, but I can probably do the same with my whole body. I don't need some idiots making me one, when to make it so they can advertise." At that, a large number of companies see the loss of a potential investment and other are amazed at Jotaro's power again. So, he's flexing again. But just in a different way. Kaminari shouts from the 1A section. And while most of the rest are confused, most are not surprised that Izuku and Saphentite were nonplussed at the whole matter. Now then, I want to say age before beauty. But I know that doesn't apply here. Jotaro says with the latter statement said under his breath. Endeavor is more and more enraged by the audacity of the young man before him. "I hope you're ready, brat," he shouts before rushing in and attacking Jotaro. He opens up with his flashfire fist, jet boosting his punch into Jotaro's head. Said person doesn't move but copies what he did against the younger Todoroki, and plants his feet into the ground to make sure he can't be knocked out of the ring. After the hit though, Endeavor could feel the pain in his hand. The boy really is incredibly durable. It's no wonder no one could even phase him. But I won't let that stop me. I can't. With that thought, Endeavor tries as many different attacks as he can to do some damage to Jotaro, who in turn blocks some of the strikes, but still doesn't move from his spot. Endeavor decides to mix in a few of his other ultimate moves, first going for a Hell Spider strike to try cutting. Then mixing in Hell's Curtain, Hellfire Storm, and the Hellfire Minefield. When Jotaro still seems to be standing, Endeavor decides to pull out all the stops. I'm impressed, boy. You made me have to pull out my most powerful technique. Eat this. Prominence. Burn. The older hero shouts and unleashes a powerful beam torrent of flames. Most people in the audience already had to move back from the front rows, but now everyone was up next to the top seats. After seeing the huge torrent of flames, most were convinced that Jotaro, even if not hurt, had to be unconscious from the heat and lack of oxygen. Guess that's what the kid gets for talking big. Quirks still are powerful, at least with the right people behind them. A few spectators stayed and see the ring as the smoke clears. Endeavor is over on one side, breathing heavily. I overdid it, but that should have knocked him out. His body is invulnerable, but only from the outside. He still has to breathe. When the smoke clears, they see Jotaro is still standing. In fact, he doesn't appear to be any worse for the wear. Instead, he is rolling his shoulders and just brushing off a little bit of soot. His pants had been charred the worst, but even that damage is minimal compared to what most expected. Then, with a crack of his neck and a deep breath, Jotaro says something that destroys people's idea that quirks are strong or the next step. My turn. And with that, Jotaro rushes at the older hero and punches him in the face so hard, it sends him flying. Or it would had Jotaro not grabbed the older man's leg and started ragdolling him on the ground over and over. After about 10 slams to the ground, Jotaro catches the man in a clothesline hit as he's bouncing up and slams him on the ground again. Endeavor manages to regain enough of himself to try and roll away, but Jotaro is him again in an instant. I'm gonna get a little weeby here, Jotaro jokingly says, before unleashing his attack. A flurry of blows that comes so fast the older man can't keep up. And while he is punching, Jotaro is just shouting, "Aura, aura, aura, aura." Saphentite though is not amused. After a big punch after that, Jotaro starts moving so fast around the ring that most can't keep up. And with each of his hits, he breaks more and more of Endeavor's body. Most of the punches break his ribs. But Jotaro mixes it up with some chops and kicks to break each of the bones in his limbs. This terrifies more and more people as they see one of the strongest heroes in their nations being ragdolled by a young man who was said to not have a quirk. The thing they believed to be what defined all of them. For the students though, they are terrified at the idea of having to face off with him. Izuku and Saphentite though are worried as they can see the look on Jotaro's face. A slightly manic grin on it. He's slipping back into that, isn't he? Izuku asks and Saphentite responds with, yeah. When he feels he needs to deal out an extremely harsh and strong punishment, his sadistic side comes out. Not saying it isn't deserved in some cases, but it's still terrifying. Jotaro seems to have heard what they said and snaps out of his haze. As he is shaking his head, Endeavor is just bloody and broken in his hand. When he looks down and sees the broken man, he calms himself more. And with that, he drags Endeavor to the side of the arena and drops him out of bounds. When that was done, he walked back to the lockers and tried to focus on calming his mind again. His main friends all decided to come in and check on him, with All Might excusing himself from the teacher's seating. No one was cheering as Endeavor was taken off to get fixed up. More were terrified that the powers they were proud of were just shown to be weaker than they could ever hope to achieve. For the quirkless though, some saw this as a good and a bad thing. They saw this as the idea that they had more potential than anyone else. But it could also mean that they may be targeted. In the following weeks of the UA Sports Festival, there would be dozens full awakenings of true metas across the world. And following that, a large number of quirked gangs would be eliminated or arrested. When the three reached the locker room, they saw Jotaro trying to calm down more and more. But he had also damaged a fair number of lockers, either by gripping and crushing them or punching them as he finished working out of his haze. He barely notices them, as they come in and help him bring his mind at ease. It takes a few inspiring words from All Might, reminding him again he can't control everything and can't always beat himself up for limitations or loss of restraint, and Izuku and Saphentite saying they are not afraid of him and that they know he won't hurt them like that. Jotaro lets out a few tears as he finally eases his mind away from what transpired with the fight with Endeavor. All Might had called and asked to wait a while before the final match. Most were terrified at the idea of Jotaro coming back and what he could do to Izuku. Others were already leaving the arena, thinking that the fight was a foregone conclusion, or were afraid of what could happen to all of them if they got caught in the shockwaves of the fight. When the two boys come back into the ring, the audience is half what it was before. As Midnight is announcing the two, Jotaro goes up to Izuku and says, "Thanks for pulling me out of that place, Izuku." With that he holds up his hand to shake Izuku's. When Izuku does though, he feels a shock run through him. "Wait, did you?" he asks Jotaro, who in turn nods with a small smile. "What's going on? What are you talking about, Midoriya?" Midnight asks worriedly, but Saphentite instead answers. "I think I know. Jotaro just gave you a little super charge, didn't he, Izuku? Meaning now, you can use your full power and you'll heal even faster and have to worry about the recoil less and less." Jotaro in turn nods and Izuku realizes another point. "This isn't permanent. I still have to build it up long term. But for now, I can give you my all without worrying about hurting myself. And to an extent without you worrying about hurting me," Izuku says with a smile growing on his face. "Hold it, you two are not fighting here. You'll kill everybody. I have a place you two can fight without most people getting caught up in it," Saphentite says before snapping her fingers and creating a portal next to them. Saphentite then says to Midnight that she can make it to where everyone can see the action on the big screens. "I suppose that is fine. But this match will have to be to a knockout. No point to a ring out in this case." Saphentite nods and gives Midnight a lift to watch the action, by turning into a magic carpet. With the two young heroes in position, Izuku goes into OFA full cowling 100% and circulating his kinetic healing at the same time. Well, this is a strange stage, out in these mountains. But it is still the final match. If both competitors are ready, begin. Midnight calls out and the battle between the two begins. They start with a mix of blows against one another, most having a hard time telling where one hit starts and ends. This continues for about 2 minutes before Izuku decides to get some distance. As Jotaro is rushing in to tackle him, Izuku unleashes a Kansas City Smash and hard chops the top of Jotaro's head. The blow sends the taller boy careening to the ground. When he gets up, he shakes his head before saying, "Yeah, that one hurt," shocking the audience that is watching the events. Izuku follows this up with a Kansas Smash, and then a Detroit Smash, to send Jotaro flying around the area. After that, Jotaro regains his composure and unleashes a powerful thunderclap to throw off Izuku's follow-up. From there, Jotaro gets in and hits Izuku with as many powerful hits as he can muster. This does break a few of Izuku's bones, but since he is focusing on healing with his kinetic meta powers, he recovers quickly. "I really can't hold back. He can take hits so much better than I can. Even if I hit a bit harder, I'll try and get some distance again," before unleashing that, Izuku thinks to himself, before kicking Jotaro back and using a Delaware Smash to shockwave push him back across the rocks. Izuku then crosses his arms and fires out tendrils of black energy. "Huh, what the?" Jotaro says as the energy wraps around him. Izuku then takes this moment to spin Jotaro around and around, smashing him into some of the rocks before throwing him a ways. "What the heck is that? That kid had that lying in wait. Why didn't he use that earlier?" He probably figured that it would come down to the two of them, and he wanted to make sure he could have it as a surprise. Most of the audience and students were saying. Tokiyami and Izuku's other teammates from the cavalry battle had an idea what it was. Midoriya had mentioned it was something new, but he was waiting to fully use it. He said he couldn't control it too well, but I guess Jotaro giving him a supercharge helped. Tokiyami said. Katsuki on the other hand is incredibly livid. Not only did he not have to put out everything against me, but he had another power waiting and he didn't have to use it against me. Am I really that weak compared to him? Yes you are. You always should be, were the main thoughts running through his mind. Back in the fight, Jotaro is shaking his head again as Izuku used the tendrils to pick up loose boulders from around the area and throw them at Jotaro. The taller boy grits his teeth, before planting his feet and unleashes a barrage of super fast blows. This pulverizes the boulders, and he catches Izuku as he rushed in after the boulders were destroyed. With his opponent caught, Jotaro slams him against the ground a few times before Izuku frees himself. Both continue this pattern of strikes and counter-strikes for at least 15 minutes. While Midnight wants to call the match after that time, she stops when she sees the look on both of their faces. They are both exhausted, Jotaro having actually taken some damage and was breathing heavily, and Izuku, while healing, isn't healing as fast as he was before. But neither of them is willing to stop. So, with a resigned sigh and a nod, Midnight allows the match to continue. I think we're both almost done. I don't think I can unleash any more really strong hits. And he's running out of steam too. But there is still one last advantage I have. Izuku has been thinking much the same, and both decide to lay everything out with one last attack. They both rush in and combo and block each other's initial attacks. After striking each other's heads, they reel back a bit before gritting their teeth and tightening their fists for one last hit. When they throw their last punches, they strike each other in the face with such an impact, it cracks the ground. The hit even breaks Jotaro's sunglasses. They both fall on their backs, seemingly unconscious. Midnight and Saphantite fly down to check them, and see the state they are in. Both are unconscious, so, whoever can stand up first and speak will be declared the winner. Midnight exclaims as the cameras focus in on the pair. The audience watches with anticipation and trepidation. Who knows which of these two powerful students will stand first? Who knows what will happen when they do? Suddenly, they notice a twitch from one, and many in 1A gasp in joy. Izuku has started to move first and drags himself up to stand. Once he stands, he takes his stance ready for the next blow. But he doesn't say anything. Then they hear a grunt from Jotaro, who has also started to stand, manages to get up and say, "Good fight, pal. You pushed me plenty hard." With that statement, Midnight declares Jotaro the winner. But Izuku stood up first. Shouldn't he be the winner? Ochako calls out, and Jotaro signals a camera to come down. At a close-up of Izuku's face they can all see it. He passed out fully while standing up. Damn it. I'm impressed he broke my glasses. Hey Safi, when we get back do you mind making me a new pair? Sure, I know you need them. Saphantite says with a proud smile, while Midnight is confused. So, she asks, why do you need those glasses? And why does she have to make you a new pair? Will you look at me when I'm talking to you, young man? Open your eyes. At this Jotaro backs up saying, no thank you. I'm already tired, so, hey. He shouts as Midnight grabs his eyelid and opens it. She then recoils in shock, while Jotaro in a bit of pain. God damn it. Don't do that. Ah, that hurt, Jotaro says. Midnight though decides to breach the point she thought when she saw his eye. Can you even see me? Or see anyone? At this everyone is shocked and dumbfounded. I thought he had heightened senses. How can he not see? Exclamation mark quote. Ojiro and a few of the other members of 1A ask. Jotaro then just sighs before saying, no. I can't see anyone or thing. I'm blind. While more and more people are shocked and dumbfounded as the four return to the center ring, Jotaro decides to clarify. I guess it's not exactly that I'm blind. My eyes are just so insanely sensitive, I can't see anything. Or rather anything more than white light. That's why I need the sunglasses. It takes a lot of the edge off of the light if I do open my eyes. Saphantite then starts casting some type of spell in her hands, muttering, let's see, orichalcum, adamantine, tungsten steel, titanium, then some extreme ballistic glass that can't be broken by meteoroids entering the atmosphere. That should do it, your usual pair of sunglasses. Jotaro just says thanks while Midnight is questioning why he needs such impressive and durable materials, some thought to be fictional, for sunglasses. Saphantite gives her a flat look before saying, with as strong as he is, he needs glasses that can survive if he happens to fall or run into something. Midnight shakes her head and announces the end of UA Sports Festival. When Izuku fully wakes up in Recovery Girl's office, he gets the rundown from said nurse. So Jotaro won in the end. Now that I think about that last exchange, I know exactly how he won. Oh, and how is that Sunny? Recovery Girl asks, but in truth she knows the answer. Right as he's about to explain, a bunch of his classmates crash in asking if he was alright and that they were glad he was awake. Now then, You were saying young Midoriya. Recovery girl asks once most of the questions had been asked. Izuku's classmates look to him, so he explains, I know why he won in that last exchange. He took advantage of a factor most of us wouldn't think of. Most of you guys thought it had to do with the amount of strength or what our power could put out right. At an affirmative nod from his class, Izuku shakes his head before continuing. We were roughly at the same level of power, though I might be a bit stronger and him more durable. He won because he was taller. This confuses most of the class that was there, so Izuku explains more concisely. He's 6'1", remember. I'm only 5'6". He could hit me in the face before I could hit him. And so, my punch would have less impact. At realizing this, Momo is the first to facepalm, and the others are impressed that Jotaro had thought about that during the battle. With the final victors named, it is time for the award ceremony. And the medals will be awarded by I am here, All Might exclaims, which makes everyone around them cheer. At that he gives a big smile to the crowd before saying how proud he is of all of the students who competed today. For the 2 third-place fighters, Ashido Mina and Kendo Itsuka, he has different words of encouragement. Young Ashido, you did quite well considering who your opponent was. Improve your skills with not just your quirk, but also your dancing. It could prove useful in a battle down the line. Yes sir, All Might, Mina said with a big smile on her face. Itsuka had a smaller smile, but she was proud of herself by showing she could win without relying on her quirk. Young Kendo, I'm quite impressed by your skills in martial arts. It is unfortunately something that has gone by the wayside for most heroes. Continue to inspire others that the work they put in can give great results. With a fist in her palm, she bows to All Might, who reciprocates the gesture. For Izuku, All Might couldn't be prouder of his successor. And he tells him this without giving away their relationship. You showed grit, ingenuity, flexibility of mind. And above all, a true spirit of plus ultra, my boy. You earned quite the victory here today. Izuku is tearing up at that and thanks All Might. When it comes to Jotaro, most in the stands are still unsure of what to think about the young man. But All Might knows exactly what to say to him. Even though you went all out against Izuku, you still held back quite a bit. I know those little windstorm and earthquake bits, you are putting a bit more force into those steps and breaths, but you still hold back in the right ways. I'm proud of you for the other matches. You chose to respect most of your opponents and give them a chance to show their skills. Or help them in some ways. All Might says as he places the gold medal around Jotaro's neck. Well now folks, that is the end for the first year competition. I hope to see greater things from these students. So good day. And good luck to the next set of competitors. Plus, Ultra. And with that, All Might leaps away. With the event done, the students head for home. For one though, he has something he has to do. Shoto, where are you going? Shoto's sister Fuyumi asks a day after the sports festival. I'm just going to the hospital. When he arrives, he resolves to make things right with the one who had scarred him. Upon opening the door, he saw the more gentle and happy face of his mother from his memories. Hi Mom, he simply said, while his mother Todoroki Ray just started to tear up at seeing her youngest son again. In the week following the sports festival, waves of change had started. Now people were questioning more about what quirks were doing and what even the point was to having them. Because now, certain quirkless people were awakening their own potential. In America, at least a dozen people got mixed up in accidents or incidents that caused them to gain powers. A boy who was electrocuted due to a fallen power line suddenly could fire lightning from his hands and magnetically move objects, even turning into lightning for a time and almost teleport. A girl in New York was drowning due to a villain attacking a ferry. She chose not to give up hope, and her power joined her with the water, defeating the villain and saving everyone faster than any pro could have hoped to. Many of the other continents had similar awakenings. From a pious man in Rio de Janeiro awakening to creating an aura like the statue of Christ the Redeemer and stopping not only rampaging villains but making barriers to protect the people. To a woman in Zurich commanding the snow and ice around her to protect her home, and even turning into said elements to protect herself. For the Asian regions though, especially the Far East, there were limited awakenings. But still, This threw off the pro-hero world. They had thought their quirks for so long could protect everything and were the greatest thing ever. Now new vigilante heroes were showing up and making them look weak and doing their job better. In certain places like the US, people were cheering more for the vigilantes rather than the licensed pros. And most couldn't catch or were stopped from bringing in the vigilantes. What's more, doctors around the world had confirmed what Jotaro had said during his match with Shinso in that quirks were causing some brain damage when they first go active. This made more look to the idea of removing or curing quirk factors in children to prevent this. But in smaller circles, others were ready to move on with the rest of their lives. For Todoroki Enji, he was trying to wonder what he could do next. He had been beaten by a person without a quirk and so savagely beaten at that point he wouldn't be able to move for at least a month. Even with Recovery Girl accelerating his healing he was still stuck in traction. This gave him time to reflect. It's not just the fact the boy didn't have a quirk. He beat me because he knew exactly how I fought. Meanwhile, I assumed he was just like All Might. But there is a difference to the two. They both may use brute strength, but the elder is much more jovial about the way he carries himself. It makes him easier to read. The boy though seems to carry himself like his powers are a burden. He hides some of what he's thinking unleashing his power. It makes him unpredictable. He also considered something important. The reason Jotaro wanted to stomp him into the ground so badly. These thoughts run through his mind as well as some of what the boy said as he dragged him to the edge. Flashback. After Jotaro had beat the hell out of Endeavor, and calmed down from his sadistic rage, he spoke quietly to the man as he dragged him. This wasn't just about beating you and showing how weak quirks are. I did that when I beat your boy. You've got the same problem everyone else has. You're trying to control the chaos of power and thinking you've mastered it. But in doing so you've lost touch with your humanity. You need to remember how it feels to be weak. Like those you've pushed around. And learn to face that weakness as a human. Not a monster. At hearing that, Enji starts thinking back to his wife and children. At how he had tried to push his oldest, until learning that his body would burn itself up if he used his power. He had tried to stop the boy but failed because of his own obsessions and ambitions. Then when he died, he put abusively everything into Shoto, thinking if he could succeed then maybe his oldest son wouldn't have died for nothing. But as Jotaro tossed him out of the ring Enji realized something. If I had let go and just tried to talk to him, and not put everything on Tuyu's shoulders in the first place. Then maybe he would still be alive, and maybe Rei wouldn't have lost herself and hurt Shoto. If I had just stepped back, rather than barreling forward and trying to control everything. At that, the hero Endeavor closed his eyes and let a few tears flow. Flashback end. These thoughts all kept running through the old pro-hero's mind as he was in the hospital. He knew that his wife was also in the same hospital and asked a few of the nurses for a favor. Could you send a few? Well, there's a flower that. If you could send them to Rei Todoroki's room, I would appreciate it. He had said with an ashamed look on his face. An older nurse had an idea about what he was doing. She quietly put in the order and took a note of something Endeavor had wanted to say to her after being stuck there for a time. While he knew that Rei would not want to see him, he could at least start trying to make amends. At UA though, there was a constant murmur of excitement. Many had noted that there seemed to be more attention on all of them. Man, it's crazy. Just one event and it's like we're celebrities. A few in Class 1A said. Jotaro was rolling his eyes at the mention of that. But they all quieted down when Aizawa walked in. Better. You quieted down quickly. Now then, you have a special class today. At that the students get nervous about what bomb Aizawa will drop next. You'll be picking hero names today. At that, most of the students cheer as they feel this is their chance to make a brand name for themselves. Aizawa uses his quirk to settle down the student before continuing on with his explanation. Aside from that, pro heroes have decided to make offers to draft you first years. Normally they don't show an interest until all of you are in your third year. But quite a few offers have been made. After saying that, Aizawa shows the list of offers made to UA for certain students. The top of the Class 1A list though, is Todoroki. But directly below him were ones like Mina, Tokiyami, and Ida. There are a few offers for Jotaro, Saphentite and Izuku, but the number is much lower compared to the rest. Hey, how come the big winners don't have many offers? Kaminari asks. Aizawa sighs before saying, unfortunately that is probably due to the, as Jotaro would say it, egotism involved with quirks. Most of the pros right now don't like or are afraid of the idea of their power. I'm guessing most of you have heard about the vigilante awakenings around the world. At an affirmative from the students, Aizawa mentioned that most can't think of what to do with these people as their powers defy most mentalities involved with quirks. So, we're stuck at a point of not being able to stop them, and not really sure if we should stop them. Besides that, there's plenty who are getting used to the idea that quirks are not as impressive as they once thought. This brings down the students, but he brings them up again by saying that they all still have a role. And we need more hopefuls and potential heroes like all of you to show the way. And to do that you all need code names. With that said, he calls Midnight, who will be helping them. With that, Midnight walks in and gives them a breakdown of what their hero names can imply, and what they mean to others who are looking to them for inspiration. One of the first to go up after being given their whiteboards is Jotaro. You have a name in mind already? Midnight asks, and Jotaro gives a nod before showing his whiteboard. Justice. It's not just because I'm blind. It's what I want to believe more in. What's more, I think that justice isn't something absolute. It has to be flexible and willing to see other sides. And yet it also has to be a rock to stand on. A few are impressed with this speech and decide to create their names based on what they believe fits best. Some, like Ojiro, Kota and Sato, choose names that match with their quirks, being Tailman, Anima and Sugarman respectively. Others, like Suyu, went with Froppy for the cute sound of the name, and Midnight praised Tokiyami and Mineta's hero names. The former, being Tsukuyomi, as the god of the night in an almost lustful tone. Which made the two foreign heroes raise their eyebrows. The latter of Grape Juice being a kitschy name. When Shoto and Saphentite came up though, they just used their names. But in Saphentite's case she called herself, the mystic hero, Saphentite Dijin. Before making a bit of a confetti effect around her. For Izuku, he was having trouble coming up with something specific. He had thought about some of the names he dreamt up as a kid. But most of those were to reflect his admiration for All Might. Things like Mighty Boy or Little Might. But now he had a different mentality, especially after meeting and training with Jotaro and Saphentite. Let alone the fact he was still considered quirkless. He may have OFA, but he also used his kinetic power a bit. Even figuring out how to copy the Black Whip power from OFA into kinetic tendrils. But there are some who are looking to the two of us as a source of hope. For the quirkless who have been put down all their lives, at that thought Izuku has his inspiration. When he walks up to the podium and presents his name. The symbol of compassion. Kibo, he said. But a few didn't get it, so Izuku explained. I've been pushed down all my life because I didn't have a quirk. I'm betting plenty of others like me have as well. But that doesn't give us a reason to push everyone else down. Most people have lost touch with this due to everyone having powers, but there is a responsibility to it. That with these powers, we have to remember to not only restrain ourselves, but to try and protect others, even if in some cases, they may not want our superpowered help. With that said, a few in the class have started to tear up a bit. That is so manly, Midoriya. Hiroshima says with fervor. Ida agrees with his statement about protecting people as best they can. With that done, the rest of the classes continue, until Aizawa is interrupted by Nezu and Sir Night-Eye. Sorry to bother you, Eraserhead, but we need your help with something. While they are talking, the rest of the class sees a little girl behind the principal. While most of the girls want to get a close look at her, Saphentite keeps them restrained with a spell. Apologies students, but we need your teacher to help with an interesting case today. So, as Night-Eye is saying this, Eri has walked around the two and keeps staring in Jotaro's direction. When asked what she is looking at, she says, that bigger boy reminds me of the ones who saved me. He had said he wasn't scared of me and held me as nice as the other one who helped me. Most of the adults are surprised by this and the students are confused. For Jotaro though, he knows what he's going to do next. He stands up from his seat and walks over to the rest. Most of the students are on edge, remembering his power and crazy actions during the sports festival. Two of the adults aren't sure what he could do to this child who has been through so much. While Nezu is curious of what he has in mind. When the tall young man gets close to them, he gently kneels down in front of Eri and says, "Hey kiddo. What's your name?" She isn't sure what to think of him at first but still responds with, "Eri." Jotaro just gives her a small gentle smile saying her name is pretty, before asking, "You ever draw much or color at all?" When she shakes her head, Jotaro just offers to let her use some pens and a notebook of his. Draw whatever you feel like. No one has to tell you what you want to do or what you think looks good. When he says that, Eri walks over to him and reaches out for his arm. When she grabs it, he reaches up and gently pats her head. He then escorts her over to his desk and pulls out the pens and some colored pencils and a notebook to play with. This whole incident shocks most of his classmates, with the guys thinking he just broke his massive brooding tough guy act for a little girl. The girls on the other hand are just squealing in their heads at how cute the girl is and how gentle Jotaro is being with her. For the teachers though, a few of them see this as a chance for the little girl to relax more around them. Though Night Eye is concerned about the girl's power and what it could do to people. When Eri didn't seem comfortable just being on the ground drawing, Jotaro picked her and her craft supplies up and sat her on his lap so she had a more comfortable place to draw. This again surprised everyone, but Eri seemed to be content with the large student. When Mina and Ochako looked ready to bust out and scream at how cute it was, Jotaro just gave them a quick look before signaling to be quiet. Aizawa decided to continue on for a while with some matters in class but asked, "Are you sure you don't need your desk right now, Jotaro?" "I'll be fine. I've gotten the information in the next chapter anyway. Besides, she looks pretty happy right now, doesn't she?" Jotaro said, looking down at the little girl on his knee. Aizawa smiled at that and moved on with the lesson. After his lecture was finished, Aizawa decided to leave Eri with Jotaro for a while. As the little girl seemed happy and content with the large student. And he in turn seemed fond of her and was very gentle and kind to her. Far kinder than anyone else has been in her life. She may also think he is similar to the ones who saved her since Chizome explained that the two who asked for his help were a large man and a woman. She seemed to be looking Saphantite's way as well. Wonder why, Aizawa thought as he left the classroom. While he was leaving, he noticed a few students had gathered outside of his class and were looking in. Most were more curious about the top two finishers from the sports festival. Even the big three. But some of the girls were looking at Eri and noting how cute and sweet she looked sitting on Jotaro's knee. When said little girl's head started to nod a bit, Jotaro decided to do something to help her get to sleep. He started to sing a gentle melody that most of the rest didn't understand. It was in English, and the main ones who could understand what he was singing were surprised by how good he sounded. "Red is the rose that in yonder garden grows, I'm not doing the whole thing. But look up Red as the Rose by the High Kings for a beautiful sound for this song." About halfway through the second verse, Eri had started to fall asleep in Jotaro's arms. While she was, he gently stroked her hair which relaxed the little girl even more. Once he was done with the song, he looked down to the little girl and smiled sweetly at her. While there were some outside the classroom who wanted to cheer for him, he quickly gave a sign to be quiet. "I've gotta take this little one to the teachers. So do you mind moving?" Saying that, the students parted and once he was gone they all started milling more. "Oh my god, how adorable was that little girl!" Mina quickly exclaimed with Toru and Ochako happily agreeing with her. Even Momo and Jiro were commenting on how sweet she looked just drawing whatever came to mind. But man, didn't expect Jotaro to be good with kids. Let alone that song he was singing. What was that anyway? Kaminari said before Jiro spoke up next. It was English, but he had a funny accent for it. "I'm more used to rock, but just that sound was relaxing." A few others agreed, with Mina being the first to make a funny comment. He seemed almost like a dad there. With how gentle and kind he was. Oh my god, could you imagine what he might be like when he actually has kids? At thinking that a few of the others can imagine him being this stern beast when fighting crime. But when he comes home, he's sweet and gentle with his wife and kids. Itsuka, who had come by to see what was going on, and to ask Ochako and Jotaro to spar, had thought about it as well. But for some reason she kept envisioning herself next to him and the kids looking like the both of them. This makes her blush furiously and forget the main reason she came there. When Jotaro got back, a few of the others decided to talk to him about how he handled Eri. "You are quite the mystery, Jotaro. You seem like this monster at times, but you're actually quite nice and compassionate. Are there other skills you have?" Ida asked, hands chopping all the while. Jotaro coughed a bit before saying he liked to cook. "But how does that work with you being, well, Yano, blind and everything?" Kirishima asked, to which Jotaro smiled saying, "I doubt most of you noticed, but I have this wristband here. It automatically transmits what is written on things I touch to my mind so I can read or get the information from it. It's how I keep up with lessons." He then mentions that his heightened senses can tell him when something is cooked just right and what herbs or spices would complement a dish best. "Plus, one of my favorite types of cooking is barbecue. And I mean true barbecue. Not what you guys do. I'm from Kansas City. I gotta do the right kind. Hell yes. No one else gets the good kind of barbecue here in Japan." The one who said this was another 1B student, Tsunotori Pony, or Pony Tsunotori. She and Jotaro just started a conversation in English about the best kinds of spices and meats, as well as Jotaro passing a glazed smoked carrot recipe to her. To which she jumped and gave him a hug as thanks. This confused most of the others there. Izuku explains some of what was going on. Jiro decides to ask her own question. "So, what were you singing to Eri? I know it was English, but I don't recognize where the accent was from." Jotaro just smiles before saying, "It's an Irish song. My grandma used to sing it to me when she'd watch me. She still had her accent, and I just picked it up over time. I learned a few other songs. I've actually got a pretty wide range for my voice. Bass to an alto. Used to be able to hit high tenor notes, but not anymore." This impresses Jiro and a few of the others. But some are just looking at him with jealousy. The lead two being Mineta and Monoma. The former is due to the number of skills he had and ways to impress the girls. The latter though was just thinking that, the top dog of 1A has so many powers. And he is inspirational in a few ways. Then to top it off, he has skills to relate to other people even when he has monstrous power. How do you compete with that? Jiro decides to ask if he knew of any other songs that might be good. Jotaro decides to sing one that might resonate differently for Hero Student and others. Some kids have, and some kids don't, and some of us are wondering why. Again, not doing the whole thing, but I feel it is important because I've been at low places in my life. And I recently heard this song again from Billy Gilman, and it reminded me of how hard it is at times to deal with. Into the second verse, a few feel some tears starting to well up. Todoroki being a main one even if he can't fully understand what is being said. Outside the class, other students feel much the same. Even Midnight and Present Mike are crying a bit during the song. At the final verse, a few are shocked at the turn, but happy it turned into a happy ending. With the song done, Jiro wipes her eyes before asking why he sang that one. "It's a bit of a reminder to all of you. And sorry to be a downer, but in some cases a lot of people like you may push others to that point. Even if you don't mean to." When asked what he means, he mentions that the cries of the quirkless were often ignored and other with quirks were quick to push them down or away. He then nods to Izuku, who is uneasy about being put on the spot. "You had to face the same Midoriya?" Tokiyami asks with concern on his face. A few others have the same look. Izuku looks to Saphantite and Jotaro, who both give him looks as if to say, "You don't have to tell them if you don't want to." But sometimes talking about this can help with healing. With that thought, Izuku sighs before opening up to his class a bit more. At hearing how Izuku was treated all through his life, more of them are shocked and appalled. And when he mentions that he had been suicide baited, because of the egotism of quirks, they are all more sickened. This is what you are talking about with the egotism and evil of quirks, isn't it? Itsuka turns to look at Jotaro after hearing all of that. Others like Ida and Momo have a different thought and excuse themselves to call their families. Both are hoping to help stop this evil from spreading more. For the teachers though, they decided to investigate more about some of the schools that send students to apply. Ochako and Kota are the first two to go up to Izuku and hug him, apologizing for what he had to go through. Many of the other students who heard all of that start taking a closer look at themselves and what it means to be human. Some of them realizing that power doesn't define them, but their actions do. In the week before the first years would go on to their internships, some others took the time to prepare and train while they were still at school. Itsuka had finally gotten around to asking Jotaro and Ochako to spar and train together. Both of whom were happy to oblige. Ochako was really interested in what Jotaro could show her. So, I mostly focused on grabs since that's where my power is focused. But do you have any other suggestions? I'm actually planning to intern with Gunhead. He's a combat hero, and that fight with Kendo got me fired up to learn more about combat. Both martial artists nodded with Itsuka noting that Gunhead was a skilled combatant. Jotaro had a different thought but agreed that the man could help her grow some other skills. I observed how you fought with Itsuka. You fought smarter for the most part, going for feints and other tricks to throw Itsuka off. But the problem was you were still depending on your power at the end of the fight. It backfired on you because you thought the gravity grab would be all you needed to finish. Jotaro explained. He went on to mention that she needed to learn to feel the entire battle. Itsuka understood, but Ochako tilted her head to the side in confusion. So Itsuka picked up the thought with, he means you need to consider all possibilities and potentials that could happen during a fight or even a rescue. Even if the end goal is saving people, you need to consider more possibilities. Ochako's eyes widened and then she thought of a different match from the sports festival. You mean like that boy Izuku fought? He relied on his power, but he tried to use it in a variety of ways when they fought. And to change up how he fought when he was red. And Izuku too. When you two fought he used a variety of tricks and other attacks to try and throw you off. Like that, whatever that black energy thing was. He used more of the battlefield to fight you. At both of their nods Ochako explained she had thought if she had fought the explosion boy, she would have tried to use the debris from his explosions to fight and either crush him or as a distraction to grab him with her quirk. Jotaro mentioned the plan wasn't bad, but even if you got him into the air, it probably wouldn't have mattered. He could use the shockwaves to push himself in the air. Ochako's eyes widen, and she starts to feel a bit downtrodden. Itsuka takes the chance to mention that they can help her with some of that. Jotaro smiles before explaining what the two have in mind for training her. For right now, you and I are going to fight. Or rather when I say fight, I mean you're going to be attacking me and I'll just be deflecting and dodging your blows. You have to get a feel for how your body wants to fight. After that you can learn a few other styles, mix together the combat arts of each, and make your own style that fits you. Ochako was nervous but could see the purpose to this style of teaching. For the next week, she learned from the two how to fight and to look at a battle or fight from all angles. By the time she headed for her internship, she had managed to actually hit Jotaro and even remove his gravity. But he showed again how that still wouldn't win a fight. Good job. But again, you can't think the fight is over with just this. As he said that turned around and unleashed a shockwave punch that sent him flying toward Ochako, who tried to run, but got squashed. Itsuka just winced at the sight. Izuku had also started training with Kirishima, Kaminari and Sato alongside Ojiro. While Saphantite offered to train them at first, Izuku and Ojiro stopped her, saying that her styles of fighting wouldn't suit most of them. Kaminari wanted to argue, but Izuku surreptitiously muzzled him with Black Whip before getting away. What the heck man, we could have had that hottie teaching us. Trust me, he saved you. You do not want to be her student for long periods. I only trained with her for a week and I know how terrifying she can be. What you saw in the sports fest was gentle. This worries a few of them and Izuku agrees. Before explaining, one of the first when learning martial was to show how strong they could be. Izuku explained, I tried to copy an all-might strike, and she took me down and almost killed me with one attack. You know that backbend thing I did against Bakugo? She did that, then flip kicked me into the ground, used a spinning roundhouse to my stomach and sent me flying into a wall. Then while I was still dazed, she did a spinning heel drop kick to the top of my head. And after that used a backflip kick to send me up into the air again, before jumping up and using a leg lock around my neck to choke me out. At hearing all of that, the other boys paled at the thought of facing off with her. He then mentions that Jotaro is often just a Spartan with his training. You shouldn't be looking at this a time to goof around. You want to get stronger, you have to take it seriously. But we don't need her levels of crazy. For now, we should get started. With that said, all 5 head for a gym to train and practice in. Izuku also helps a few of them with some ideas on how to use their powers more efficiently. For Sato, after finding out that different sugars do affect him differently, advised him to focus more on that element to his power. But the usual cubes give a major strength boost. Shouldn't I just stick to that? Sato asks, and Izuku shakes his head before explaining. There might be times where you need a different form of strength. Normal sugar rushes you use amp your strength, but you run out of energy too fast. You have to either find a balance or shift the ways you use your power. Sato sees his point and decides to try baking with more than just Japanese sugar. For Kaminari, Izuku suggested that he could have some capacitors that he could get a quick recharge from. You're not like Jotaro who just recharges from ambient energy. You have to get it from local sources, right? At Kaminari's nod, Izuku continues by mentioning that if he had some small capacitors to plug into, he could at least get a small recharge. Hiroshima and Ojiro mostly spent time sparing. Ojiro likened the training to punching boards or other materials to harden and toughen the skin. Hiroshima saw this as a good way to get a feel for when to strike. Others worked with each other to train and improve their quirks before their internships. Mina had asked to train with both Saphantite and Jotaro to learn capoeira. And she felt firsthand at just how they could be if their student didn't take the lesson seriously. First from getting the crap kicked out of her from Saphantite, then from Jotaro when she thought he would take it easier on her because she was a girl and weaker than him. But nope, he knew what she had in mind and gave her a big lesson. After a few heavy hits, and some ragdolling, he grabbed her head and slammed her into the ground. Not hard enough to knock her out but still hard. He let up enough to say, "Hurts don't it?" Well, guess what? That's exactly what a villain could do to you. If you think anyone will hold back for something as shallow as gender differences, then you're just asking to get killed. If you don't take this seriously, not only will it get you killed, but it might get someone else killed. Even without seeing his eyes, Mina could tell how serious he took this matter. And even though she was hurting, she tried to stand up to face off again. But he stopped her before having Saphantite take Mina to Recovery Girl. You know he was right, don't you? Saphantite asks as she is flying Mina over. Yeah, I'm so used to thinking that being a hero was a different kind of big deal. I guess we've gotten used to All Might and the peace he's brought. You two have probably seen some messed up stuff since you're both quirkless. That probably where a lot of that mentality comes from, Mina says. Saphantite smiles a bit before saying it was something like that. Recovery Girl was mad at Jotaro and Mina for being reckless. But privately she has a different thought. That boy truly knows the weight of heroics that we all carry. I guess that is why he is so resolved and strong in his opinions and convictions. After that and having some time to think, Mina's own resolve hardens, and she takes the lessons with the two more seriously. For many of the others, they each had different plans for both training and what they would do for internships. Ida had gotten an offer from his brother and was planning to learn from him how to make the most of his family's engine quirk. Suyu went to intern with the Oki Mariner crew under the hero Selkie. Hiroshima and Tetsu would both intern under the hero Fourth Kind, though neither would know it until later. Shoto was planning to intern with his father, but said man was still in the hospital. I'll probably be fully healed about halfway through your internship, Shoto. I still intend to teach you. But for the time being, you might want to work with Vernon to get a better feel for your fire. Also, your mother may not have been a hero, but she knows a lot more about the ice power than you or I. She could help you much more than I can. This admission of limitations from his father surprises Shoto, but he agrees. From Class 1B, Shiozaki goes to work with Kamui Woods. Yanagi also takes up an internship with Gunhead. When Ochako realizes they are going to the same place, she asks her why she chose that one. During the match with Anwar, I realized how much I relied on my power. She did too in a sense, but what if there are other villains with powers that can throw me off? Or ones who can disappear? I need to be a better fighter, she says with serious look on her sleepy face. Ochako smiles and agrees before mentioning that she's been from Jotaro and Itsuka on other ways of fighting. During the lead-up to the internships, each of the quirkless heroes got different offers. Saphentite decides to join Momo and Itsuka on an internship with Uwabami. Izuku gets an offer from Sir Night-Eye and feels like this could be a good chance to learn from the best former sidekick of All Might. Jotaro had a different offer made to him though. All Might came to meet him before he went to train with the others. There's an interesting offer for you young Svoboda. Apparently, they feel you could help them with understanding some of the vigilantes. This is the address if you want to take a look. Really, you're saying that to the blind kid? Jotaro jokes. When All Might tries to backpedal, Jotaro just says he's messing with him. When he grabs the paper, his transmitter on his wrist gives him an idea of what is going on. When it's time for Class 1A to head out for their internships, each have different hopes and thoughts about what the next week of working with the pro heroes could do. For Jotaro though, he's curious about what is going to happen next with this place All Might mentioned. When he gets to the location, he notes that it is a home a fair distance away from the rest of the city. While this would terrify and worry most, Jotaro isn't too worried. Even when the door closes behind him, I think it's fair to say I was somewhat set up, Jotaro says with a smile. From beside the door, All Might walks toward him in his medium might form. Not exactly. I have something different in mind. Let's sit, shall we? When they sit around the coffee table, Jotaro decides to ask what this quiet house was. Night-Eye set this place up a few years back. He always wanted me to take a break. Just stop for a while and get a good rest. It's been here for a while, listed as an off-site storage and records location. Jotaro nods before thinking it's All Might's own little getaway. So, then he decides to ask the bigger burning question. So, what did you want to talk about, All Might? Does it have something to do with Izuku? That is part of it. But not all. Young Midoriya mentioned that the power he used was in fact a previous user of OFA's quirk. The one they had before receiving OFA. Jotaro's eyes widen, even though they can't be seen. And he asks how that is possible. It's just a theory, but their quirks could have been mixed with OFA. I remember that during my early days of using OFA, I'd see visions of the previous users. But as time went on, they stopped. But what you mentioned about the minds of quirked people being dimmed when the powers go active. It could be that when the quirk sacrifices the parts of the brain, it takes part of the personality that will develop over time. And since that and the quirks are passed on, it might answer why young Midoriya said he's never seen me really in OFA. Because I didn't have a quirk to mix with it. Jotaro whistles low before saying, do you know about the other previous users? All Might admits he only knows the one before him, but he'll do some research into the others. But that isn't the whole reason I had you come here. There is a workout and training area in the backyard. Follow me. Jotaro is still skeptical, but he is also curious. When they get there, All Might asks if they can drop the formalities for a time. Sure, thing Toshi. So, what is it you wanted my help with? He says with a smile. Toshinori just nods before, taking a stance and high-speed dashes in a direction. Though Jotaro can't see it, he could tell Toshinori had basically turned into light. Now I get it. You want help to better understand your meta power. Yes, I found I can only use it in this form. I've tried using it in my All Might state, but it's much more difficult. And since you know more about this type of power, I wanted your help. Jotaro just laughs a bit before saying the whole matter was an inverse of what the internships usually are. Toshinori chuckles along with him before saying, so John, do you have some ideas on where to start? Right now, I've only figured out the dash trick. Said teen hums a bit before asking Toshinori to describe what he feels like when he does it. All Toshinori can say is that it feels like the world slows for a second before he stops. And that it takes all of his concentration to do. And it feels like I can't breathe when I do it. Like I have to hold my breath. That might be one of the hiccups that's tripping you up. You already know how to let power flow through you. You learned that from OFA and how you used it. But this is a bit different. Instead of trying to activate it, turning it on and off like a lot of quirks, you need to let go of the control. Try and just feel the energy flow. This statement surprises the blonde since it is similar to what Gran Torino had told him at one point. His point was that the quirk was not as special as he thought it was. So, Toshinori closes his eyes before feeling the small tug of his other power. But rather than try to drag it out or manipulate the power, he just let it flow through him. No forcing it throughout his body like he had done with OFA. Unbeknownst to him and unable to be seen by Jotaro, Toshinori has a slight glowing aura around his body. With his hair turning bright white instead of blonde. When he opens his eyes, he again sees the world in slow motion. But not in the same way as before. Before it was like time stopped, but now it was like he was only moving at 1.25 times the speed of everyone else. But Jotaro could still track him. Toshinori decides to try this out and the two spar for a while, with the pro getting some good hits and actually hurting Jotaro a bit. After a few minutes, Toshinori is out of breath and Jotaro is impressed at how he handled the power. Nice job. Didn't think you'd get it right away. But I think we need to take it up a notch. And I know how. Toshinori raises an eyebrow before asking what he meant. Jotaro just smiles before taking a stance and breathing deeply. He grips his hands into fists and lets some special energy he had been saving flow through him. When he is done, Toshinori is shocked at the new figure before him. As well as the deeper voice that comes from the young man. Now then, let's really get down to business. When he says that, Toshinori sees a flash of light behind the sunglasses. What did I get myself into? He thinks as he lets his power flow again to spar with the other hero. For the next 2 days after Jotaro arrived at All Might's hidden home, he trained the older hero in how to use his newly awakened power. All Might was getting better and better, but he still couldn't fully throw off Jotaro. I'm moving so fast, almost like that former hero a clock. But you always seem to know where I'm coming from. He says after one session with the transformed Jotaro. Who responds with his deeper voice, it's not surprising. You know my history, and my experience. Not to mention in this state, I'm probably stronger than you at your maximum with OFA. As he is finishing saying that Jotaro changes back into his usual form. The part that beats though is that I can't hold it for long. I'm about as bad as you with your All Might form. But less blood loss. Both chuckle at that while they sit down to rehydrate. All Might brings up that he had begun to look into a few of the other previous holders of OFA. Claiming that it could give them an idea of what could happen to Izuku next. We're lucky that he could play it off both as a capability of his true meta power. Let alone the fact he's figured out how to copy it into other matters. Jotaro agrees with this before asking about some of the previous users. All Might goes on to talk about his mentor and her quirk of float. Jotaro huzzes at that before mentioning that he can do similar at his maximum. But I really hate using it for a few reasons. Namely that I have to vent large amounts of energy to fly and the like. I can show Izuku a trick that should allow him to copy it with his kinetic powers. We're lucky that is how his chose to manifest. You've mentioned that while we were training. Isn't there a genetic factor or a type of way the potential of power is passed with true metas? All Might asks before Jotaro comes back with a quick note, before explaining that true metas are more random. Literally, there is no way to predict whether or not someone can awaken a meta power. In some cases, a child of 2 metas will never have any powers awaken. Or someone with no history at all of meta powers in their family will inexplicably gain the ability to control machines or similar. It's a total crapshoot. And frankly I think that is for the best. Jotaro explains before saying that if it could be predicted, then there would be more kids like Todoroki in his home. He explained that people stopped trying so hard to control all of the chaos and just focused on doing what they could. That even some metas didn't use their powers unless absolutely necessary. This makes All Might contemplate what a hero means more and how their own hero society has been somewhat misguided over the years. As quirks gained more power, and more heroes rose, not only did they get an idealized version of quirks, but they also lost sight of the weight of a mask. The burden that hangs on the shoulders of those who wear capes. Meanwhile we have more and more children like young Bakugo who just think their power makes them heroes. Aizawa does all he can to curb some of those problems, but just like me he's only one man. Jotaro nods before mentioning something to All Might. That he needs to take a break. When All Might has a puzzled look that Jotaro can't see, but knows he is giving, he explains, I've only been here 2 days man and I can hear you moving around at night. You were looking back into the previous users and what could be awaiting Izuku. And while it's a good idea, you need to rest. I know you're a workaholic, but Night Eye did set this place up as a refuge for you. So, use it. He says the last part with an easygoing smile before saying that he can look up a few things in the meantime. Puzzled by the idea of him looking things up, Jotaro mentions his wristband reader and a different factor. That he doesn't really need to sleep, or eat, or breathe to an extent. I'm not at my max so I can't last forever, but I can do some looking up in the meantime. All Might just gives the teen a deadpan look before facepalming. But he agrees. For Saphentite, Momo and Itsuka though, they are all thinking they chose the wrong internship. Uwabami had made them an offer primarily because she found them all quite attractive girls and that they would be prime candidates for her agency. Both hero and modeling. I'm actually curious Anwar, what all can you do with some of your transformations? This puts the genie girl on the spot, but she sighs before mentioning that she can change herself quite drastically. Momo is one to wonder how she would have fought Izuku if they had used all of her capabilities. He could have thrown me off still. That tendril or whatever it was power he just manifested could have caught even me and threw me out. Itsuka was one to nod and could see the tactical potential of the technique. Momo on the other hand feels a bit left out as the two banter though. Saphentite notices this as does Uwabami. The later standing up to say, don't worry about certain things too much. Aside from adding wrinkles down the line, you may miss details that are right in front of you. Sorry about that Momo. Hey, I might have an idea. Miss Uwabami, there is an area we can train or spar, right? Saphentite asks the older heroine. Who smiles before saying yes, knowing where the genie girl is going with this. She shows them to a gym adjacent to her office and dressing room. Saphentite goes on to explain that both her and Itsuka can train with Momo to improve her combat skills. The ponytailed teen is surprised that they would offer, and Uwabami says that the idea is not only good, but it is a reflection of hero work in many cases. As you know I have these 3 snakes as part of my quirk. Sadly, they are limited in combat. In many cases I'm more for ambushes as well as search and rescue operations. It is where my darlings work the best. Itsuka even mentions that she may not have gotten as far if she didn't have Jotaro instructing her. Explaining that aside from being a harsh teacher, he doesn't just focus on the fighting aspect alone. What do you mean? Momo asks before Saphentite jumps in next. He's a fighter when he gets worked up. And he definitely isn't above pure brute force for the fight. But he also knows that technique can carry a fight even more. Heck, he knows how to attack pressure points combined with his electricity to stop some enemies. She goes off on a tangent about him often avoiding taking hits even when it can recharge him. Saying he prefers to dish out damage rather than take it. And the only times he takes hits, is when he wants to demolish a fool who thinks that their power will carry them through everything. Or that they win just because of their power. Saphentite says with a smile that seems to be reminiscing about a shared past. That though gets all of the women present curious, though for all different reasons. Itsuka wondering what the relationship between Saphentite and Jotaro is. Momo questioning Jotaro's mentality pertaining to said events. And Uwabami, well, she's just thinking about trying to get Jotaro and maybe Izuku in for a photoshoot with the girls. Speaking of whom, Izuku has been working at the Sir Night Eye agency. At first Night Eye didn't seem to approve of him much. But he eventually relented when Izuku brought up a fair point. I know you had been grooming Tagata-senpai for the power of OFA. But this wasn't your decision. And it may not be what Tagata-senpai wanted. I think he wants to save people on his own merit. Even if offered, he might turn it down. Night Eye looks down at his paperwork after Izuku said that and acknowledges in his mind that Izuku had a point. I can see why All Might and that Jotaro boy are impressed with this young man. He's rough around the edges. But that just means he needs someone to file away the edges. And luckily, I'm one of the best at said type of work. During Izuku's time training there, he practices with Lemillion to get a better handle on a few of the things he can do. All Might had sent him a message about what a possible other quirk he could awaken from OFA. And that Jotaro had suggested about how to pass it off. I hope that doesn't show up. I'm not ready to learn about aerial combat yet. Izuku thinks while practicing his power with Lemillion. Not bad reflexes. And your speed is impressive too. You landed a good hit on me, said blonde hero says after punching Izuku in the stomach for the 5th time that day. Izuku had the wind knocked out of him of course, but he recovered quickly. After training with Saphantite and Jotaro, he learned not only how to throw a punch but take one as well. He then had a wager to make with Lemillion. How about we fight without our powers? No permeation. None of my kinetic powers. Just hand to hand. If I can land a blow that knocks you down 3 times, or I throw you on your back 5 times, I win, and you pay for lunch. But if I can't before lunchtime, in about 45 minutes, you win, and I pay for lunch. Sound good? The older teen finds the idea intriguing, so he agrees. During the match, it didn't take 5 minutes for Izuku to land at least one good hit to knock Mirio to his knees. And in the next 2 he throws Mirio onto his back. Okay, wasn't expecting that. Guess I'm out of practice against people who can fight. Or rather I'm so used to fighting people with quirks who just want to use them and aren't trained well, so I'm getting thrown off by your skills, Kibo. He says with a big smile on his face. Izuku on the other hand is impressed with his senpai's skill. Even without his power, he can put up a decent fight. I'm betting just like most villains, he's gotten too used to fighting with only his quirk. But it won't take long before he figures out my base patterns. Gotta throw him off, Izuku thinks before going in for another attack. After about a minute, Izuku tripped up Mirio taking advantage of his own patterns. Izuku did a leg sweep and Mirio jumped up into the air quite a bit. Izuku then grabbed the mat beneath them and tossed it up. Mirio was tempted to use his permeation but didn't out of respect for the duel. He didn't expect though that Izuku would go for a low blow from behind and then throw him onto the ground. Oh, not cool, actually. No, it was smart. Didn't think you'd get behind me though, he says while trying to catch his breath. He then mentions that it would count as both a knockdown and throw down. That means one more hit and you win, Mirio says trying to bait Izuku into the easy way. But Izuku doesn't take it and throws Mirio again. A little under 15 minutes had passed since they started and Izuku had Mirio on the back foot. So, he decided to go for broke and put as much as he could into his strikes. Izuku takes a few hits but eventually gets an opening. He low backflips, before going in with his own variation of the Oklahoma Smash, though with no power behind it, think the one he does in MHA1's Justice 2. With that hit in, Mirio calls it a good fight and agrees to pay for lunch. Night Eye had been watching from the doorway to see what would happen. And he was not only surprised at Izuku's skill, but that he had beaten Mirio without either using powers. I might need to have Mirio go back to the basics with hand-to-hand combat. And it may not hurt for me to do the same. It might save my life. He thinks out loud during lunch. Later in the week, he gets a call from All Might at his hideaway, asking him to bring Izuku and Mirio, saying that, I need to tell young Midoriya a few things. And it may not hurt for you to hear some of them as well. The later statement confuses Night Eye but he agrees to meet his old boss and friend on the last day of the internships. The next day though they get caught up in an incident in town. A large villain as he was called had started to rampage a bit in a grocery store. He was attacking the butcher area and devouring the raw meat. At one point though, the heroes in the area tried to attack him. He pushed most back, shouting, "Stay away," and the like before grabbing a little girl and her mother to get them to back off. Night Eye and his group had been called in for backup and were working out a plan to stop the villain. But Izuku had a different notion, especially after hearing some mention that he should have been locked up earlier. He quietly slipped into the grocer and saw that the man was just eating more meat. He wasn't even holding the hostages that close. That was when he decided to put his own plan in motion. The little girl noticed him, and her reaction alerted the large man. Right as he was about to roar, Izuku interrupted by saying, "Wait. I'm not here to fight you. Let's just calm down." He pulls his mask back and takes off the gear on his boots and gloves. He then sits down in front of the man. While all of them are confused at his actions, it does make the man relax a bit. "How about we just talk for a second? I'm guessing you know who I am. And what I can do. I don't have a power that lets me control people." The large man nods, and Izuku asks him why he's there. The man goes on to explain that his quirk constantly needs blood and red meat. "When I was little, my quirk seemed to just start making me bigger and bigger. I found out it strengthens my muscles. But I don't want it. It hurts a lot of the time, and I'm so hungry all the time." The big man looks like he is about to cry and is trying to reach for some meat further away. Izuku just smiles and uses Black Whip to grab a bit and pull it to him. The big man thanks him and Izuku just keeps talking to him, eventually suggesting a few other things to help him with what his quirk is doing to him. "But to get you some help you need to come out. Please. Just let them go and I'll try to get you some help," Izuku says with a concerned look on his face. He really hopes this works. To both the surprise of Izuku and the hostages, he agrees. He lets the girl and her mother go, but Izuku asks them both not to just run out. "We don't need them attacking him. He's suffered enough, hasn't he?" The mother wants to disagree, but she does see Izuku's point, and the little girl, while still a bit scared, goes over to the man to take his finger and walk him out. When Izuku and the others come out, everyone is surprised. And though some of the heroes want to attack the big man, Izuku stops them with Black Whip. "Sir Night Eye, can you get a hold of a psych unit? This man could use more of that help," he says calmly, and Night Eye is impressed. He and the police chief call in the unit to take the man to get some help. But before he is taken away, he asks Izuku who he is. With a warm smile, Izuku says, "I'm Kibo, the symbol of compassion." After saying that, the news groups start taking his photo, and then get a photo of the little girl hugging him and the large man. Before both say they hope he gets better. With a light smile of his own, the big man is taken away. Other hero students have different experiences with their internships, from Jiro getting to aid in a hostage situation, to Tsuyu helping Selkie fight smugglers off the coast. For Shoto, though, he has started to make some headway in learning how to use his fire. And while his father is still a harsh teacher, there is less aggressive actions and words said during the sessions. "You're getting better, at least with intensity and direction. But you need to learn to work on variation of attacks. While they may not have worked against your classmate, some of my best moves use variation to my fire powers. That explosion you pulled off with mixing the super cooling the superheating is a good example," Endeavor had said after a sparring session before they went out on patrol. After one day, Shoto had been planning to visit his mother. An action which Endeavor not only approved but asked a favor. "She won't see me, and I don't blame her. I've done far too many cruel things to earn forgiveness right now. But could you take a few of these flowers to her son? You don't have to say they're from me. Just maybe say that I mentioned that she liked them," the flame hero says with some regret on his face. Hard to think this was the same man who had made him and the rest of his family suffer for a time. "I'm not betting the beating that Jotaro gave him was enough to cause this. He must have said something to him." He and Midoriya have different ways of inspiring people. The fire and ice user thinks while heading to the hospital. For Tetsu and Kirishima are both quite happy to be working together at the Fourth Kind Agency. But both are a bit intimidated by the imposing four-armed hero's personality. Both get smacked on top of their heads more than once. Others like Tokiyami have to work to keep up with Hawks, but he eventually creates his own technique using Dark Shadow. And Ochako and Reiko both improve their skills working with Gunhead. Said Pro commenting that, "You seem to have some new skills since the festival. Did you train with someone before coming here?" "Yeah, Jotaro, the guy who won. He trained with both of us on some martial arts," Ochako says during a break in training. For some they aren't so lucky. Mineta for one basically has to live as Mount Lady's errand boy while interning at her agency. On the fourth day of the internships, Jotaro brings up a point to Toshinori. We might want to try patrolling or whatever down in town. I'm thinking it might work for you for a different matter. Jotaro goes on to explain that he wants Toshinori to keep his power flowing the entire time they are in town, commenting that he should get used to using it in public if he wants to continue doing some hero work. He and Toshinori had come up with a possible plan for when All Might need to retire, and he could start fighting whatever new power Toshinori had. With a quick agreement, the older hero powers up and runs off to town, while Jotaro leaps his way to the town. Once down there, the civilians were surprised by the two strange people in their town, but most recognized Jotaro from the sports festival. But Toshinori on the other hand is confusing to them, with his white hair swept straight back, looking like streaks of light and his eyes glowing white as well. But an unusual visitor and interloper decides to make themselves known. So, you're the big dog from UAEH. Both heroes look up and see none other than the rabbit hero, Mirko. Well, Jotaro knew she was there, but he was mostly questioning why she needed to make a big spectacle of the matter. And he can't see her anyway. Said hot-headed heroine jumps down from the small rooftop and walks up to the two. I recognize you, kid, but this guy the first don't know. What's with the glowing hair? What are you? Toshinori says before looking into a window and seeing what his hair looks like now. Jotaro on the other hand comments that, and that's one of the biggest drawbacks to being blind. You miss some little details like that. Mirko chuckles a bit and puts together that Jotaro was working with the person she didn't recognize. I know they were doing internships with the first years, but I didn't think they'd have you on the lookout for those true metas as you call them. She says before asking who his internship is with. Technically, it's with a subsidiary of All Might's agency. This place is generally quiet, and this guy needed some help to better understand how to use his power. So, they asked for my help. Saphantite may be a fighter, but she's not really a meta like me. And quirks don't apply at all here. Jotaro explains before mentioning that they were just patrolling to get a feel for how his powers could work. Mirko nods and asks to tag along for a while. Don't you have your own agency? No, I tend to wander where I feel something interesting is happening. I was following you, but your buddy there has me curious as well. She says with a slightly feral grin on her face, while Jotaro is just thinking that she's a battle junkie. For quite a while nothing interesting happens, until on the highway a crash occurs with a prison transport. A few of the criminals inside had already broken out and were attacking other cars. Toshinori's first instinct is to go All Might and stop them. But Jotaro elbows him to stop and signals he needs to stay in this new form. Mirko had already gone ahead with a few leaps, but Jotaro and Toshinori quickly overtake her with their speed and leaps as well. When they get to the highway, a few of the villains are rampaging, but Jotaro knocks two of the biggest out quickly. Toshinori on the other hand takes a page out of a clock in his student's book and goes with a high-speed barrage of hits to take out a villain. The villains turn and see the two, and a few are intimidated by the fact that the UA Sports Festival champ is there. But a spider-quirked woman isn't as worried as she has taken hostages with her quirk. Once again Toshinori wants to do this like All Might but knows he can't. But he takes his time upping the amount of his power flowing and accelerating himself even more. I can't hold this for long. But I can do this long enough to get the civilians away. He thinks and rushes in at high speed. He quickly frees every trapped person and takes them a fair distance away. Jotaro knows what he is doing and smiles all the while. And the idiot villain and other flunkies are gloating. Except one. But Jotaro decides to point out, yeah, your advantage is gone. Maybe stop monologuing and you won't find yourself with your pants around your ankles. The villains look around and see that all the hostages are missing, and in fact a few of them do have their pants dropped around their ankles, with some getting tangled up in the Spider-Woman's threads. While Toshinori and Jotaro are laughing a bit at their expense, they both decide to finish the fight. With a few moves, they defeat all the villains before Mirko even arrives. To which she is extra pissed. Oh, come on. Bad enough you two are so fast, but you didn't leave me one. She says with a little stomp. But this in turn causes part of the bridge to give way. And as one family in their car is about to fall, the villain who wasn't laughing at the hostage situation jumps in first. He stretches out his arms and slows the car long enough for Jotaro to get under it and fly it up. Wait, you can do that? Yes, but I don't like to do it very often. Next time watch where you step, idiot. Jotaro reprimands Mirko. Toshinori on the other hand addresses the man who saved the family. Why did you help them? The man looks down before admitting, he was only an underground fighter for money. But I don't agree with hurting people. At least civilians. I've won a fair number of bouts before I got caught, but when the heads of the arena were wanting to bring the house down cause the heroes found it, I tried to help some folks out. He mentions that most of the pros involved had taken the credit for saving people he had, and he was still convicted. Mirko on the other hand is impressed with the fighter and his compassion. Let alone the fact he had said he was fairly competent. What's your name? They just called me Stretch in the ring, but my name is Gomtai Hazama. Hazama says, and Mirko says she won't just remember it. She'll try to help him get some extra justice for his good actions. This surprises most of them, and when the other officers arrive to take most of thugs away, she requests that he be sent to the local police for the time being. I think I'll stick around for a while. I want to see more of what you two can do, she says before calling a local hotel to reserve a room. Jotaro and Toshinori look to each other, sweat dropping at the thought of being stuck around the Mad Rabbit. Well, this is interesting. The guy who had that black whip or whatever power had possibly held OFA for about 10 years or so. Each previous user may have only had the power for about a decade before that AFO maniac caught up with them. But how did he know each time? Unless, Well, for now I need a second opinion to follow up on this guess. So, I call Gran Torino the evening before Night Eye and Izuku are supposed to show up. What do you want? Can't you let an old man sleep in peace, Toshinori? Sorry about that, but this is someone else. I'm following up on something Toshi was looking into. I tell the old man with a chuckle. After explaining who I am and my relation to Toshi and Izuku and the fact I know about OFA, he feels more inclined to work with me. So, you want to know about how long my sworn friend had OFAEH? I'm guessing you have a suspicion how long it was as is. Or you wouldn't have called. At my affirmative and saying I had guessed about 10 years, the old man agreed. He went on to explain the two of them were a fairly capable hero team back in the day. Explaining that they were nicknamed the high-flying duo, and they could get to crimes and defeat villains faster than most at the time. After he's done reminiscing, I mentioned that there is a chance that Izuku could gain her power. Even without seeing his face, I can tell he is dumbstruck. From what Izuku and the previous user he spoke with in his mind said, he'll be unlocking all of the previous user's powers. Since you knew her well, maybe you could fill in a few blanks. I say before explaining that I need details on the one before her. After a bit of hem-hawing around, Torino gives me a few details. The guy who had passed it to her was named N and had some sort of smoke power. And entrusted the power to Nana after a desperate fight had left him basically dead. But he still believed in what Nana could do and was hopeful for the future. Well, that could interesting for Izuku to learn. But it'll also be tricky to pass off. That might be one he'll have to figure out himself. Torino chuckles at the mention and asks what I'm doing with Toshi. I'm basically his teacher right now. You know what that is like, right? After a bit of a laugh between the two of us, I continue by saying, he needed someone who knew more about this type of power he's awakened. And I'm the only one he trusts for now, and I managed to fix him up. Wait, what? The old man shouts over the phone. After jerking away, I mentioned that I had restored his internal organs and gave him back some time that had been dwindling away. I might have broken the old man because it sounds like he's muttering to himself. He finally snaps out of it and thanks me for not just teaching Toshi, but also saving his life. Nana entrusted him to me, and he still ended up badly hurt. If you saved him, you've helped me as well. Thank you. I smile at hearing that. Before I hang up, I suggest to him to keep an eye out in his area for possible true metas. And to teach them if he can. If that old man can make someone like Toshi into a capable hero, he can do that with just about anyone. Night Eye POV. I'm not sure what All Might and his intern want to talk about, but I know this has to happen. I've been avoiding him since he was injured, and I kept pushing him to find a successor. I had truly expected him to choose Mirio. The boy seems almost like a mirror at times to my old friend. And with his quirk he could be an even greater hero than what All Might represented. Though, what Kibo said is an exceptionally good point. Mirio wouldn't have wanted to be a hero just to replace All Might. He would have wanted to become and show the kind of hero he is, on his own merit. Not the kind that I set up for him. Perhaps some of that insight is what All Might saw in the boy. Let alone what he did for that poor man from the other day. After hearing what that Jotaro boy had said about quirks hurting people without us seeing it, I guess it shouldn't be surprising that the quirks could be causing more pain as they get stronger. For now, though, we have a big discussion to go through here in this place I set up for All Might. I'm amazed and glad he finally used it. I called late one night and was so happy to hear that Jotaro boy answered the phone instead of All Might. He mentioned that he had made sure All Might slept and was following up on something related to OFA as a whole. The power Kibo had used was apparently a previous user's quirk, which is very surprising, but maybe that is where some of this discussion will go. When I open the door to the house, I can see All Might resting on the couch. At least I think it is him. He's not as emaciated as he was the last time I saw him. As he snorts awake and looks toward me before saying with a small smile, "Hey Mirai. It's been a long time." This is All Might no doubt. Midoriya doesn't seem surprised, but even though I had explained a few things to Mirio, he also is shocked by seeing the greatest hero in Japan so much smaller. What has happened in the last year? No POV. Once the visitors had arrived, a few explanations could begin. So where would you like us to start? Jotaro asks first with a smirk on his face. Night Eye decides to start and asks how All Might had somewhat healed from his injuries. Mirio mirrors this thought as Night Eye and Izuku had shared some of the secret of OFA with him. While he was floored that such a power exists, the fact that Izuku was awakening more powers, and that there had been someone strong enough to gravely injure All Might, was an even more terrifying thought. All Might speaks to the fact that Jotaro had been the one to heal him. He and Saphantite fixed me up. The girl used her power as a genie to create some base cells for my stomach, and Jotaro used a special energy wave that accelerated my healing and restored both my lungs and stomach. The fact that the boy who they thought was just strong and powerful, had healing abilities amazed them as well. With Mirio realizing that he truly was outclassed in terms of multiple things he could do compared to the freshman. Okay. Give me a second. So, after he healed you, you are now able to stay in this hybrid form and have some of your time extended. Night Eye asks before All Might smiles saying, not only that but I've unlocked something. With that he stands up and lets his new power flow through him. Jotaro goes on to explain that All Might had underlying potential as a true metahuman. Describing his new power as a super speed type. We got involved in an incident the other day and he was able to move so fast and save everyone before the villains could even react. Izuku speaks up next as having kinetic absorption, amplification and enhancing powers as his true meta power. But I'll admit it is taking a backseat to what is awakening within OFA. I barely managed to talk to the fifth as well as the first users. All they mentioned was that OFA has reached a singularity. And that my true meta powers seem to be working in concert with the quirk. That might be a good thing, Izuku. I'm thinking there may be a bigger problem down the line. Jotaro says with a serious face. What do you mean? Is there something that could hurt him? Mirio asks with a concerned look on his face. Jotaro shakes his head before going into a lengthy explanation. I've been doing some digging along with All Might. Looking into all of the past users. Yes, I can do that even though I'm blind. Moving on, I found something unusual with who I'm guessing is the fourth user. I can't confirm, but it seems like he may have been hiding away from everyone. Possibly to figure out how OFA works. Most accounts say he was something like a hermit, only having one contact, the one who would become the fifth. But that's not the strangest part. I found an autopsy report on him. It said he died of old age. At 40 years old. This part shocks and confuses all in the room. All Might questions how that is possible since he held the power for 40 years before passing it to Izuku. This is when Jotaro gets a pained look, before admitting he is mostly speculating on his next point. I think it may have to do with quirks. I'm obviously not sure, but it may have something to do with it. There's a couple of things pointing me to this. You told us about the fact that when some people were given quirks by AFO, they became mindless, right? With a quick affirmative from All Might, Jotaro continued by explaining that some part of a person's mind might be attached to their quirks. Again, I have no proof, but something made me think of that after researching in the USJ incident. Remember the Nomu? Those things had multiple quirks. They were dead bodies more than likely modified to handle more than one quirk. What if the person's consciousness remains with their power? It makes no sense, but I might be what is muddling the minds of the creatures. And why they can only follow orders. He said before going on with the idea that the only reason it may have worked for AFO for so long was that his own will or mental capability destroyed the other minds he brought with him. Or he sealed them away. After the lengthy explanation of what could happen with quirks that are stolen, Night Eye asks how this relates to Izuku and All Might. Right, got sidetracked. Anyway, what if a person who gains OFA on top of their original quirk has their body start to break down because, well, quirks are somewhat detrimental to their health already. Adding another one, or in this case 6 powers on top of it, could cause their bodies to break apart more than just the recoil. The only reason it worked for these two was because they just by chance had bodies that were more malleable and had more potential. And I'm not talking about the true meta powers. The only reason they could unlock the full power of OFA is because they both weren't held back or damaged by an original quirk in the first place. Night Eye's eyes widen at the implications of what Jotaro just said. Mirio is the first to speak up with, so if this power was passed to someone like me, or anyone with a quirk, we might have died not long after having it transferred. Jotaro admits that he's just guessing. His own experience is from dealing with true meta powers, saying that they are fundamentally different compared to quirks. How do you mean? You've never actually explained how you know all of this, and why you are so knowledgeable about these true meta powers. Who are you? Night Eye asks. The three quirkless look between each other as if having a conversation in their minds. But All Might gives Jotaro a look as if to say, you should tell them. With a sigh, Jotaro says to hold still before putting his hands on both of their heads. All of a sudden, Mirio and Night Eye see visions of Jotaro's world. Who he is, what he's done, and what he represented in his old world. When he's done, Night Eye looks up at the teen, eyes full of admiration. Mirio himself comments, well, that explains so much. No wonder I wasn't a challenge. If anything though, I'm glad you are here. The last statement was given with a smile, before offering his hand for Jotaro to shake. Which he does happily. After all the exposition is done, the two get brought up to speed on a few matters, including a plan All Might and Jotaro had put together for when OFA fully leaves All Might's body. Night Eye agrees with the thought process but finds it unsettling on what All Might intends to do after OFA is gone. But All Might was firm and said, it has to be done, old friend. I can leave as the symbol of peace, but with what I can do now I can still save so many people. Night Eye just sighs before asking him to take a bit more time to rest though. With that done, all involved stay for a dinner Jotaro had set to slow bake before they arrived. In the town though, Mirko is visiting with Gomtai about what he used to do in the arenas. I focused on throwing people off on how far I could punch or kick. Wore gloves or skin-tight pants that had stripes on them to give off an illusion effect. Made them underestimate my hits. Plus, when you can wrap around multiple limbs with little effort, you can make some people submit pretty easy. He says with a grin while sitting in his cell. Mirko gets a chuckle out of that and decides to ask a few other things about his background. She had done a check herself, finding out he was from an extremely poor family out in the sticks. He didn't have much and couldn't afford to go to a hero school. Instead, he fell into underground fighting and found he had some skills and talent for it. He used that money to try and help his siblings. At least that was what she had found, calling in a few favors. She wanted to hear from him what he was fighting for. When he explained that he had just been fighting to help some family and that he was more worried about them than what was going to happen to him, Mirko smiled. That was exactly what I wanted to hear. Listen, I have some pull with the commission. You agree to some conditions, I might be able to swing you getting released to my agency. Gomtai is confused by her offer and asks why she is making it. She goes on to explain that he has good skills for a fight, and he's not interested in hurting those who don't deserve it. You might not be able to be a hero, but I think you could do a lot of good as an instructor. Just give it some thought. I'm here for another day. See you later. As she leaves, Gomtai goes over the offer in his head again and again. He's just amazed that any hero would give him a chance. He's already been branded with the stigma of a villain due to his underground fighting past. But she's still willing to help him. It might be worth taking. I doubt I'd get an offer like this from anyone else. And maybe I can still help back at home. If mom hasn't wasted all the money on booze again. When Mirko visits again, she can tell what Gomtai is going to say. If you're willing to believe in me, I'm willing to give it a try. He says with a small smile. She nods with a big grin on her face before calling to the commissioner. While said woman isn't too sure about a villain being allowed to work at a hero agency, when Mirko brings up the fact that some heroes had taken undue credit, she relents with a grumpy sigh. Her job done, Gomtai is eventually transferred to a precinct near Mirko's agency, and he get released to her custody as a parole for his sentence. On the last day of the Night Eye agency group's visit as well as the last day of internships, Mirio and Izuku thought it would be a good idea to spar with both Jotaro and Toshinori. I want to see what you've learned from Jotaro, All Might. And I've got some new techniques to show both of you. Izuku was the first to say. And Mirio was quick to chime in with, I've only seen a little of what Jotaro is capable of. Kibo is impressive on his own, but you two are great heroes as is. The two who had been training in secret saw this as a good opportunity. For Toshinori, he could get a better feel for how to use his meta speed with most people. So far, he'd only tried to use it against villains. Or rather thugs. It is just like John has said. Most of the people we all call villains are little more than thugs or animals who want to use their quirks however they want. They don't stack up to true villains like AFO, Shigaraki, or that Dabi maniac. He thought to himself. For Jotaro though, he saw this as a chance to see how Izuku had grown since he'd gotten a feeling for what his maximum could be. So both agreed and Jotaro was the first to step up against Izuku. They both agreed to keep it simple for the most part. Jotaro had shown Izuku how to replicate the power of float or flight with his kinetic powers, but the Greenette still needed time to refine it. Let alone learning how to use the float quirk alone. Let us all agree that you will stop the matches after a set time. I'd say about 5 minutes. Night Eye called while the two were warming up in the large field behind the hideaway. With a quick nod, both boys got into position before rushing each other. Jotaro opened up with a kick, but Izuku was quick to jump over it and deliver a kick of his own to the larger boy's face. This sent Jotaro back a bit, but he was quick to recover and respond with a slam to the ground. The slam didn't hit Izuku, but it did send dirt flying everywhere. And before he could react, Jotaro was on him with a strong right hook. Before following up with a couple of rapid punches. But Izuku surprised him again by firing off 6 Delaware Air Force smashes. Right into Jotaro's chest. This sent him back again, and Izuku wrapped him up in black whips. He proceeded to spin around a few times while calling out, Wichita Line Smash. Before slamming Jotaro into the ground. When Jotaro got up, he coughed before saying, Wichita Line huh. Guess you overheard me singing that a few times. When he stands, he unleashes a shockwave of his own, sending Izuku backwards. Jotaro then takes advantage of the metal soles on Izuku's boots, by using electromagnetism to pull the smaller hero toward himself. He spins around and unleashes a strong straight to his face. This almost knocks Izuku out, but he powers through and uses another new attack. By wrapping Jotaro in a rock with separate black whips, he slams the two together. Calling out, Atchison to Santa Fe Smash. This throws Jotaro off again, and he reels back after the hit. Izuku then makes a light rhythm in his head before following up with a Manchester Smash. Followed by a double chop hit called West Virginia Smash. This pair of chops to his shoulders causes Jotaro to flinch. And the ground around the two cracked. But that isn't enough to stop the larger boy, whose eyes quickly flash, and he clotheslines Izuku. He spins a bit before slamming him into the ground. Once Izuku has bounced up a bit, Jotaro unleashes a flurry of blows. And with one final punch, he sends Izuku flying. Or he would have flown further, but Izuku had just started floating without a prompt. Okay. Guess you just awakened the seventh's power. Huh, well at least we prepared a bit with passing it off as a true meta power. Jotaro says. To Toshinori though, seeing Izuku floating up like that reminds him of his old master. Mirio and Night Eye though are impressed that Izuku seems to be adapting to the new power quickly. Night Eye then calls the exercise, and Toshinori steps up with Mirio. The latter is extra excited to be training with the number 1 hero. But Toshinori points out, I'm not fighting as All Might here. I haven't picked a hero name yet, but for right now, I'm just Toshinori. With a small smile, Toshinori lets his meta power flow and all who can see get a good look at his white light form. Mirio is in awe for a moment but regains his composure and dives into the ground. Toshi has a guess to where he will come from and is ready for the boy. Right when Mirio pops out of the ground, Toshi is behind him and lands a solid kick to the boy's side. Mirio manages to phase through a tree he was flying toward but isn't quick enough to phase through a super speed punch from Toshi. As the younger man is rolling back, he quickly slips into the ground. He then pops out under Toshi, but the older hero sees the attack in slow motion. While he isn't quite capable of avoiding the hit entirely, he can adjust to where the hit will do far less. As he slides back, Mirio is catching his breath. I expected him to be tough thanks to his experience, but he seems to know just what I'm going to do. Guess that experience counts for much more than I anticipated. Mirio thinks to himself while attempting to dodge and phase through as many high-speed hits as he can. But he can't keep holding his breath. And when he lets it out, Toshi is on him in a second. Which is enough time to copy his Michigan Smash and barrage Mirio with hits from all sides. With one final punch to the face for a good knockout measure. It doesn't actually knock Mirio out, but it is enough for him to concede the match. No way I can keep up with you. Doubt anyone can. Well, Jotaro can, but not as he is right now. He has the potential to match me in speed in this form, let alone outclassing me in terms of strength in my All Might form. This makes the younger hero's jaw drop, and Night Eye is so wide-eyed that his eyes are all but popping out of his head. They both look at Jotaro, who just shrugs, saying, I'm saving that trick for something special. You'll see it soon. With a sigh, all decide to leave it at that. The Night Eye group headed back to the agency the day after that, and the other two decided to spend the day patrolling and observing around the sleepy town. And across the rest of Japan, various other hero students were improving and somewhat enjoying their last days with their mentors. With the exception of Safentite's group. They all weren't too keen on being models for a commercial. With the training done, Jotaro and Toshinori head back to UA. Once back, they all start discussing their internships and what they had learned during their time. Ida had learned a few new tricks to help him get around at higher speeds from his brother. I'm not quite ready for the family special enhancement, but I should be soon. Momo was feeling a bit more confident, but she was still doubting herself after working as Uebami's assistant. Safentite was quite annoyed by the whole matter. Mineta was slightly traumatized for some reason. A few people though were quick to comment on the incidents that Izuku and Jotaro had gotten caught up in. You really lived up to the name and title you chose for yourself. So manly. Kirishima was quick to say while patting Izuku on the back. Tokiyami was quick to make a different point. Jotaro, who was that person that helped you defeat those villains? He's a new true meta. He's a bit older, but still pretty capable once I helped him figure out how to use his power. A few of his classmates oohed at the mention of him training a true meta. With Ida commenting, while that is a bit of a deviation from what the internships intend, I can see the merit in it. You two were even faster than Mirko. At hearing that he got to see the top female hero up close and personal, Kaminari was quick to ask a few questions. And Jotaro was quick to cut him off with a chop to the head. Sato then brings up a perspective that most of them hadn't thought about. You mentioned that most true metas awaken at random and by accident once. So, what happened to you? How did you get your powers? The large-lipped student asks while scratching his head. Jotaro's eyes widen behind his glasses, and a few take this to mean it is a memory or something that he doesn't want to talk about. But with a sigh, Jotaro explains some of his fake backstory. I was on a sailing trip with family in California. I had family out there. There was a storm, and I got washed away and they never found the rest of my family. Sato is quick to try and apologize, and some of the others look at Jotaro in sympathy. He then continues by saying, that wasn't when my powers awakened. I washed up on a deserted island, and I was stuck there for a few months. Then another storm brewed, and I ended up getting struck by lightning. It activated my powers all of a sudden, and I could hear so much it was driving me crazy. Then all the energy in myself activated somehow and I caused an explosion that destroyed the whole island. At that mention, the other students are terrified of Jotaro's power potential again, as well as feeling like he has lost too much in his life. Saphantite and Ochako are the first to go up and give him a hug. Saphantite takes over by saying, our families were friends, so he wound up living with me for a while. I think you were 10 at the time. It wasn't long after that, I accidentally angered some powerful spirits from my father's homeland. And they cursed me into becoming a djinn. And he freed me from that. Momo and a few of the other girls nod, thinking that explains the two's closeness. With the explanation done, Sato stands up and bows, apologizing to Jotaro. Aizawa then decides to come in and tell the students what the next few weeks will entail. Though he is also planning to have Jotaro meet with Hound Dog to deal with some of his issues. But while the heroes were getting ready for the next assignments and training, the villains were starting to make moves of their own. In a shady bar, Kurogiri and Tamura were talking with the master and the doctor. I've at least somewhat recovered, sensei. I still can't believe the guy who did this to me didn't have a quirk. But a different power altogether. Let alone those other two. Tamura says while wincing a bit. He feels up the false limb gently, careful not to touch it with all 5 fingers. He can still feel the ripping of the appendage off, and it makes him want to rage a bit more. He starts to mutter about the government weapons called heroes, but Kurogiri stops him for a moment. It didn't seem as though it was intentional. The boy in question seemed terrified of himself and what he did after he did it. The master then hums a bit before saying, I guess that isn't overly surprising. Not only is he hoping to be a hero, but there might be plenty of people who would be scared of what they could do if they had his power. He and the doctor both mention that plenty of people who first awakened quirks were much the same in the earlier days. Many had lost sanity or sense of what it meant to be human. Though AFO did mention it had happened about 20 or so years before he was born. In many ways, his and the others' powers might be more natural or just a different form that is less detrimental. No one knows how or why quirks started appearing. And now these new powers are appearing. But they all seem random. I agree. And while I can extract quirk factors, I wouldn't even know where to begin with this new meta factor. Tamura stops the two men from going on their own tangent. By mentioning that they need to grow their ranks again. And not just with riff-raff crap out of the back alleys. We need real party members. Tank, caster, the works. The older men agree, and Kurogiri mentions having put out a few feelers. So far though, only 3 had responded favorably. Toga Himiko, Mr. Compress, and Magna. Dabi had seemed interested but wasn't giving a straight answer. Muscular and Moonfish were in as long as they got interesting people to kill or fight. But it still wasn't much. And with Stain out of the picture, they couldn't get others for a possible rallying cry. That is when the doctor brings up the possibility of bringing in Gigantomachia. The master decides to call his most loyal bodyguard through his speaker. But it isn't Makia who answers. Sorry, the big guy is down right now. I'd say I'll take a message, but I'm not sure if he'll ever be able to answer once we're finished with him. This worries the old villain. If his best bodyguard is already beaten, then one of the best weapons to put him back into power and possibly gain a new body is gone. But he maintains his composure before saying, I would prefer it if you didn't destroy my subordinate. I need him alive. The person on the other side just huzzes. He then asks who exactly is calling. Let's just say I had a hand in the recent attack on UA. Oh, interesting. So, you're with the group who is looking to tear down part of this messed up society, Course you assholes are wanting to do it with quirks. We have our own agenda on that. If he still had eyes, they would be widening at that statement. So, the master quickly says to the man on the other side, you have true meta powers, I'm guessing. I wasn't expecting to meet a true meta villain so quickly. But I guess given the current hero and quirk-focused society you would have passed under the radar. Something like that, and I get the feeling that while you want to end the hero society, it's just so you can have quirks be the ruling power. No thanks. Keep breaking his arms and other bones. Make sure he can't move. The person on the line says. The master is both annoyed and worried for Gigantomachia at what the true meta-villain is describing. So, he tries to make a deal. I know you hate quirks and all those who basically worship them. But, if you want to make more of a difference, you might find working with us benefits your cause. The villain on the other side hums a bit in contemplation, and the master sees this as his opportunity to try and get a strong set of allies. He continues with, I have experience, resources, and a few strategies and plans to bring everything crashing down. And you could have a leading role in all of that. My successor could help lead you there. Just then, he hears a sickening snap and a cry out from Machia, as well as the humming from the supposed leader. After a minute, and more cries from Gigantomachia, the leader responds. And his response will further shake the quirked world. I'm listening. I've gotta be honest, I didn't see the FA Jin power coming with the most recent chapters, unlike the Nagant backstab AFO pulled. Totally saw that coming, but I think it could be a very good one to complement the Izuku I'm making here. In a sense, Izuku's meta power allows him to have permanent FA Jin boosts. But the energy can be used in a variety of ways. Like the healing factor and other applications. FA Jin just allows him to build up the energy and release it explosively in blows and attacks. But aside from that, I wanted to bring up that not everyone with true meta powers would be good. There would be plenty who would hate both the current society and those behind it. So that is where the others come in. I'll get into detail with them more later. Please review. Also maybe leave some ideas for a new hero name for Toshinori. To be continue. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.